Chapter 518. Apart from the direction of the misty forest, cultivators from other countries who were chasing after Xianxia arrived one after another. However, they were all baffled by the miserable cries. More and more people arrived, but they all gathered at the outskirts. No one approached. Compared to the people who rushed over in a hurry before, they were like two different people. The people who arrived later did not understand what was going on. They asked the people who arrived first what was going on. After getting the answer, they were all dumbfounded. Hearing Bai Meng's sorrowful cry, everyone was silent. They all decided to wait and see. Bai Meng's cry was met with Xianxia's sneer from within the sea of fire. "There's something wrong with your head." The black flying swords continued to kill. Bai Meng and the others could only watch. They wanted to help, but when they thought of the unstoppable power of the flying swords, they were powerless to approach. They were already scared out of their wits by the black flying swords. The few hundred people below were almost completely wiped out. The remaining people were forced into a dead end by the black sword net. They had no choice but to release their protective aura and charge into the colorful and thin fog behind them. They tried to hold on for a while and then come out again. What came as quite a surprise to the spectators was that the mysterious and fearsome mist forest wasn't as terrifying as they had imagined. Those people actually managed to survive in a hopeless situation. Even the protective aura of nascent soul cultivators could be used. Withstanding the protective aura, they really managed to run out from the other end. Everyone guessed that it might be because the fog at the outskirts was thin and the poison was not strong. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to escape so easily. After all, the misty forest that had been legendary for countless years was not a joke. With an example, almost everyone died. The remaining few dozen people no longer hesitated. They all released their protective aura and rushed in. The ground was covered with broken limbs, dismembered corpses, and a pool of blood. As the green sea of fire blew past, everything was instantly turned into ashes. The bloody history just now was completely erased. The road ahead was unobstructed. Xianxia successfully charged into the colorful fog. That surging green sea of flames gradually disappeared along with Xianxia in the seven-colored fog. The black flying swords also disappeared in their wake. Perhaps it was because of the heat, but the color of the fog had become thicker. Previously they could see dozens of meters away, but now they could only see 1 or 2 meters away. Bai Meng's group of 9 landed in front of the misty forest. Their faces were ashen. In total there were close to 800 people. These were the rising stars of the sect, the future backbone of the sect. But looking at it now, there were only about 300 people left. Xianxia had single-handedly massacred nearly 500 people. The most distressing thing was that 5 experts at the end of the crossing tribulation stage had died just like that. Bai Meng's entire body was trembling uncontrollably, his fists clenched to the point of cracking sounds. If he had killed Xianxia and obtained the treasured saber, it would still be acceptable. But in the end he did not obtain anything and instead caused such a huge loss. How was he going to explain this to his master when he returned? Thousands of people had gathered in the surrounding air. At this time they all landed one after another. Looking at the pile of ashes on the ground, they all shook their heads and sighed. At the same time, they secretly felt lucky that they did not block Xianxia first. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. No one had expected that Xianxia could be so powerful. It happened almost in an instant. Nearly 500 people, including 5 cultivators at the end of the crossing tribulation stage, were killed just like cutting melons and vegetables. Especially the 10 cultivators of Hassa who were lucky enough to survive and began to chase Xianxia, they were even more frightened. It turned out that Xianxia had not been serious with them. Otherwise, none of them would have been able to escape. These people glanced at the people of Jinshan country, who all had deathly pale expressions and couldn't help but gloat secretly. They thought it was good that they died. Who told them to be so arrogant at the beginning? They were rushing to die. However, they still had to thank them. Otherwise, no one would know who the ashes on the ground belonged to. The muscles on third brother Xian's face twitched. He didn't know how many trump cards this guy had. The absorbing stars technique was scary enough, and now he had a batch of black flying swords. Even cultivators at the end of the crossing tribulation stage could be killed as easily as cutting cabbages. Thinking that he was also at the end of the crossing tribulation stage, he couldn't help but shiver. He knew his bad temper very well. If he didn't need Xianxia's help, he would have fallen out with this guy many times. They really fought. Third brother Exen didn't dare to think about what would happen next. Brother Bai Meng, I'm sorry for your loss. Brother Bai Meng, don't be sad. There will be a chance for revenge eventually. People who knew Bai Meng all comforted him. Although their words sounded nice, they didn't know how many of them were sincere. There was also someone who snorted, "This guy probably died when he entered the fog forest. It's a pity that those 2 treasured sabers are going to be lost in the vast fog forest." At this point, that person was slightly startled. He seemed to have thought of something. He looked around and realized that everyone was thinking about the same thing as him. Everyone was reminded by his words. If Yu Qianzhou really died in there, they wouldn't dare to go in and look for him with their cultivation. However, the soul formation stage masters behind them could go in and look for him with their high cultivation. Everyone looked around with flickering eyes. They memorized the direction where Yu Qianzhou entered and prepared to wait. If Yu Qianzhou really didn't come out, this direction was the best place to find the treasured sabers. They could go back and report to their masters. What's wrong with them? Among the people looking around, someone suddenly pointed at the disciples beside Bai Meng and asked in surprise. Everyone looked over, only to see the dozens of people standing together, all of them silent and motionless under the crowd's gesticulations. His expression was ordinary, but his face was glowing with a sparkling luster. The skin on his face looked even better than a woman's, and he had a delicate and alluring charm. Bai Meng and the others were stunned as well. Fifth junior brother Lu Zhenyang, who was by his side, frowned and said, "What's wrong with all of you?" In the end, even after he shouted a few times, those several tens of people still didn't move, and this was slightly unusual. Lu Zhenyang slowly walked over and stood in front of the dozens of people. He found that their bright eyes were shining brightly, but they seemed to have no one in their eyes. They didn't even look at him, an elder of the sect standing in front of them. Disrespecting one's elders? If it was just one person, it would still be acceptable. However, if all of them did the same, it would be impossible for something like this to happen. Lu Zhenyang walked over and raised his hand, wanting to pat one of them. Yet he heard Bai Meng shout, "Junior martial brother, don't touch it with your hands." Lu Zhenyang's hand hung there, not knowing what was going on. Bai Meng said in a low voice, "They are all disciples who just came out of the misty forest. They might have been poisoned." When everyone heard this, they all whispered to each other and nodded, obviously agreeing with Bai Meng's words. Lu Zhenyang was shocked and didn't dare to touch it anymore. If he was infected by a deadly poison, it wouldn't be fun. Taking a few steps back, he raised his hand and snapped his fingers. With a whoosh, a gust of wind shot out and hit one of the people's face. He had grasped the appropriate amount of strength. This gust of wind that he shot out would at most cause the person to have a bloody nose and a swollen face. There wouldn't be any other consequences. However, what surprised him was that the disciple's skin color wasn't just tender and alluring, it had really reached the point where it could be broken by a blow. With a light dew sound, a pitch-black hole appeared on the disciple's face, giving Lu Zhenyang a fright. How could this be? I didn't hit so hard. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. From the hole on the disciple's face, pitch-black dirty water started to flow out. It flowed down his cheeks and dyed his clothes black. Just as the dirty water flowed out, wrinkles started to appear on the smooth skin on his face. Then starting from his head, he started to shrink. Then he swayed unsteadily and slowly fell backwards. The people standing behind him were knocked down by him and also fell down unsteadily. One by one, dozens of people fell down in an instant. And when those people fell down, they were immediately like brittle paper bags filled with water. After falling to the ground, they couldn't withstand the pressure and burst open. Hua hua. The dirty water flowed all over the ground, and the people nearby all took a few steps back to avoid it. Those who fell down were all stuck to the ground like paper soaked in the dirty water. A disgusting stench started to spread in the air. Everyone frowned, and at the same time they were secretly shocked. What a powerful poison. In such a short period of time, other than the skin on the surface of the body, the blood, flesh, and bones all turned into black dirty water, and the outside became even brighter and brighter. Everyone looked at the dense fog forest again and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The colorful fog of the dense fog forest looked gorgeous and colorful, but it contained a deadly poison. Looking at the people who were still poisoned, they still looked bright on the outside. Who could imagine that their insides were actually a puddle of pitch-black dirty water? Why is it like this? Lu Xingyang muttered to himself and looked at his hand that flicked out the wind. Although he knew that these disciples were poisoned to death, he felt that he was the main culprit. In the blink of an eye, that flick of his finger caused another dozens of disciples to disappear. The remaining close to 300 cultivators of Jinshan country all had deathly pale faces. Everyone was silent out of fear and no one said a word. It would probably take a long time for the shadow hanging over their heads to disappear. Bai Meng's breathing gradually became heavy. He suddenly raised his hand and slapped out a strong wind, slapping the remaining few poisoned disciples, causing everyone to once again witness a disgusting scene. Bai Meng walked with large strides to the front of the dense fog forest and shouted angrily, "Yu Qianzhou, come out for me if you have the guts." He shouted at the top of his lungs a few times, but only heard his voice travel far away and no one responded. The cultivators of the surrounding countries all shook their heads and sighed. This Bai Meng was probably mad with anger. That Yu Qianzhou had already been in there for such a long time and the odds were against him. However, Yu Qianzhou's actions were a bit strange. Since he had such extraordinary ability, why didn't he break out of the encirclement? Why did he have to enter this place of death? It was really unimaginable. Third Exon looked into the depths of the fog and kept muttering to himself, "It's all my fault, it's all my fault." Lu Xingyang tightened his lips and went over to pull Bai Meng. "Eldest senior brother, it has already happened, we need to think about it at length." Just as the two of them turned around, Yu Qianzhou's sinister laughter suddenly came from the dense fog forest. "What are you shouting for? I've always had guts. If you don't believe me, I'll show you. Take this." Chapter 519. Everyone was stunned. That guy didn't die? Third brother Xian's expression was even more interesting. It could only be described as winking. Everyone was still in a daze. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. A large number of black shadows shot out from the thick fog. "It's a flying sword, run!" One person screamed. Everyone was shocked and quickly dodged. Yu Qianzhou's flying sword was not an ordinary flying sword. Hundreds of lives had been taken as a warning, and there were still 5 cultivators at the final stage of crossing tribulation. Whoever didn't run was a coward. However, there were nearly 5,000 cultivators chasing after Yu Qianzhou. Those at the final stage of crossing tribulation were fine as they teleported into the air. However, most of the cultivators were not at the final stage of crossing tribulation. It was not a problem for them to run in an orderly manner, but what was the scene of 5,000 people flying around randomly? They were even more headless than headless flies. It was really a mess, so much so that many people flew up and were knocked down again. Bloody noses and swollen faces were not suitable for cultivators, but in order to escape, there were many who fought and kicked. Some people pulled, some people kicked. "Who asked you to block my way?" There was a lot of shouting and cursing. The result of this chaos could be imagined. Thousands of black flame flying swords shot out like lightning and strangled people. There was no need to deliberately control them, all they had to do was rush into the crowd and shoot randomly. Magic tools and magic treasures were all useless. They could not block the attack of the black flying swords at all. All the obstacles were so fragile that they were easily defeated. The shouting and cursing immediately turned into wailing and screaming. They cried so hard that the sky and earth almost changed color. This scene was even more spectacular than the previous 500 people. This time it was 5,000 people and it was called a rain of blood. Not to mention the rain of blood, even the broken limbs and other body parts were like rain. Blood was everywhere and everyone's eyes were bloodshot. The more they ran around, the more opportunities the flying swords had. Those at the final stage of crossing tribulation who flashed into the air were shocked by this tragic scene. Among the 5,000 people, those who were lucky enough to escape were floating in the air, watching the flying swords dismembering people in the midst of the fleeing crowd. They did not feel lucky, they only felt a chill down their spine, and their bodies trembled uncontrollably. Massacre. It was a massacre. Yu Qianzhou had gone mad. He had no regard for human life. What they didn't think about was whether they had gone mad when more than 5,000 people forced Yu Qianzhou into a dead end. He ignored his own heartlessness, but it was difficult for him to accept the heartlessness of others. Even third brother Exon, who was watching everything from the sky, turned pale with fright. Yu Qianzhou was too crazy. He didn't seem to have the slightest intention of showing mercy. His flying sword was mercilessly killing, as if he didn't want to let a single one of them go. Everyone had been in the cultivation world for quite a long time. Among those who could participate in this direct pursuit, there were no core formation stage cultivators, not counting the informants. They were at least nascent soul stage cultivators. Think about it, for everyone to be able to make it to this day in the cultivation world, who didn't have a few lives on their hands. Even dozens of lives or hundreds of lives would not be a rare case. But those were accumulated. Probably not many had personally killed more than 100 people at once. However, the scene in front of them made these old fellows who thought that they were experienced and knowledgeable, completely dumbfounded. This was a completely aimless, inhumane and reckless massacre. Everyone suddenly thought of the name Xianxia, and they trembled in fear. A nightmare-like seed was quietly planted in their hearts. The more people they killed, the wider their field of vision became. Without too many obstacles, the remaining people finally ran away covered in blood. Their clothes were drenched in blood. They ran far away and didn't want to look back. It was too terrifying. Xianxia, who was hiding in the colorful fog, was also a little stunned. It wasn't because he was scared by the number of people he killed, but because he didn't expect the result of this sudden attack to be so good. It was unexpected. Out of these 5,000 people, almost 2,000 had lost their lives to his flying sword. Recalling the flying sword, he quickly hid first so as not to be killed by the other party. Xianxia once again sneakily disappeared into the rainbow-colored clouds. The flying swords that had been slaughtering for a while also slipped away. The people in the air looked at the bloody scene on the gravel desert below, and they couldn't recover for a long time. Complete corpses were rarely seen, and the dismembered corpses were almost all dismembered corpses. The wind of the wilderness took away the strong smell of blood, and it didn't take long for more than a dozen eagles to circle in the air. A moment later, a few large bald vultures flew over. These scavengers were not afraid of the humans in the air at all. Seeing the feast that could fill their stomachs below them, they swaggered down without any scruples. There was a lot of food, which was rare in this desolate land, so everyone didn't have to fight for it. Their sharp claws pressed the corpses, and their hook-like sharp beaks tore off a piece of flesh and raised their heads to swallow it. The cautious eagles, seeing that the vultures were safe, let out a cheerful cry and swooped down one by one. However, it was these cheerful cries that woke everyone up and brought disaster to them. When everyone discovered that these feathered beasts were actually eating the corpses of their fellow disciples, they were immediately furious. A flying sword shot out and a vulture was cut into two. Following that, countless flying swords shot out, and the anger that they couldn't vent on Xianxia was vented on these feathered beasts. In an instant they were all slaughtered and feathers flew in the air. Then the leading cultivators of the various countries gathered their disciples to count how many people they had lost, and the result was not optimistic. However, there were also people who were slightly relieved because their people were originally standing on the periphery and none of them survived. There was joy and naturally there was sadness. The most tragic thing was that other than the late-stage tribulation passing experts of their own country, all the disciples of the sect were wiped out, and not a single one survived. Most of them suffered heavy losses and there were still a few people left in the sect. What should they do? Everyone looked at each other in a daze. When they came to seize the treasure, they were full of confidence and thought that it would not be a problem to deal with Xianxia. Unexpectedly, Xianxia caused heavy losses to each country and the price was too heavy. Especially those countries who had rushed here in a hurry and had not done anything just because they got close to watch. They suffered an undeserved disaster. It really made people want to cry but have no tears. They didn't get anything and so many people died. How should they explain it back? This was the common thought of the leaders of the various countries. Xianxia, get out of here. Ji Fenglu, a cultivator at the late stage of tribulation passing from the Yasa country, roared at the misty forest. The Yasa country didn't do anything to you and you actually killed all my disciples. What's the reason? Get out of here, I want to fight to the death with you. Beside him stood two pale junior brothers, who were also at the late stage of tribulation passing, and they seemed to be a little weak. There were nearly 100 people who came with them, but they were all killed just now, leaving only the three of them alone. It would be strange if they weren't angry. In the misty forest, Xianxia's surprised voice came, "No way. I don't even know the people of the Yasa country, why would I kill them for no reason?" Judging from the voice, this guy was hiding very far away, at least a few hundred meters away from the edge of the forest. Seemed that he was very careful. We came with more than 100 people and now there are only 3 of us left. How dare you deny it? Ji Fenglu roared again. You Xianxia, if you have the guts, come out and fight to the death with me. Don't be a coward. Don't tell me that you brought more than 100 people from thousands of miles away just to chat and brag to me. Are you trying to scare me? You brought so many people to chat with me? Who are you trying to fool? Damn it. If I don't make the first move, should I let you thousands of people make the first move? Bah. I'm wrong. In fact, it was you who made the first move. I was forced to fight back. A group of inhumane bastards. Yu Qianzhou cursed. Ji Fenglu was rendered speechless by his words. In reality, they were here to kill Yu Qianzhou and steal his treasures. This was something that everyone was well aware of. Otherwise, with thousands of people who would have nothing better to do and come here to play. Ji Fenglu could not argue, so he continued to roar to vent his anger. You Qian the coward, come out, old dog. Is your head on your butt? Who's the coward? Yu Qianzhou laughed and scolded. I'm sitting here like a clock facing thousands of people without retreating. Look at you cowards, who dares to come in and fight to the death with me? Is there anyone? None of you. I just casually showed my hand and you were scared to the point of crying and screaming, running around, making me embarrassed. Touch your butts and think about it. Who's the coward here? Damn it. I've never seen such a shameless person. In terms of glib talk, these old men who were used to being high above were no match for Yu Qianzhou. Ji Fenglu's face turned red and he could not say a word. The cultivators around him, including those who were scolded, all had ashen faces. No one made a sound. Although Yu Qianzhou's words were a little unreasonable, it was undeniable that it was the truth. Who here dared to rush into the misty forest to find Yu Qianzhou to settle the score? He might really be sitting there swaggering, but no one could do anything to him. This was really unbearable. Third brother Xin looked left and right in the crowd. Today he finally met someone that he was convinced of. This brat relied on his own strength to make such a large group of people suffer. In terms of fighting and eloquence, he could fight thousands of people alone. What a talent! Third brother Xin could not help but sigh at his master's wisdom. He never participated in the disputes of the cultivation world, and only cared about saving lives. If he was like the other countries and brought people here today, not only would he suffer, he would also be very angry. Everyone, I, the world's #1 expert below the soul formation stage, am sitting here. If anyone is not convinced, feel free to come and challenge me. One-on-one or all at once, I will take you all on. In the colorful fog, Yu Qianzhou's infuriating and mocking words came again. Chapter 520. What a joke, the dozens of disciples in front of him hadn't even turned into dirty water yet. They didn't cry out in pain or feel any discomfort, dying so mysteriously. Who dared to barge in now to die? But what was inconceivable was, why was Yu Qianzhou, this guy talking cheerfully and wittily inside, completely fine? No one made a sound in reply, letting Yu Qianzhou mock and ridicule inside. Whoever spoke back was just asking for it. Ji Fenglu was a very good example. Right now he was gnashing his teeth in anger, but there was nothing he could do. Yu Qianzhou scolded for a long time until his mouth was dry, but no one paid attention to him. He couldn't be bothered to scold anymore and started to split his attention to examine this mysterious misty forest. Hearing the scolding inside stop, Ji Fenglu's expression changed. Crap. Misty forest is so big, what if he runs away from somewhere else? Where can he run to? Bai Meng said with a gloomy face. Unless he hides and never shows his face, he can forget about escaping the pursuit of the entire cultivation world for the rest of his life. Everyone nodded their heads repeatedly. They all felt that Yu Qianzhou had taken advantage of the dense fog forest. In addition, he had been caught unprepared by that mysterious magic art. If he had been surrounded elsewhere with a few more experts attacking him at the same time, he would definitely not have had a good time. Don't worry. Yu Qianzhou's voice came again. I will definitely not run away from somewhere else. Tonight I will break out from here, all of you prepare to die. I won't talk to you guys for now. I'm going to take a stroll around first. I'll come back to settle the score with you guys at night. His tone was abnormally arrogant, practically treating all the cultivators in the world as nothing. Ji Fenglu was so angry that he kept shouting. His hands formed a circle, sucking up a large pile of gravel from the ground, and fiercely pushing it towards misty forest. A large pile of densely packed gravel shot in with a whistling sound. In the mist, Yu Qianzhou was just about to turn around to look around when he heard the whistling sound of the wind behind him. He jumped in fright, thinking that the other party had launched an attack. Without another word, thousands of black flame flying swords flashed out and destroyed all the things that came at them. The reason why the fog here was thicker was because he had used the water art to release the fog. This was to better control this area and avoid being ambushed without him knowing. Therefore, no matter how many stones were shot at him, they were all shattered. When he found that all the stones on the ground were stones, he felt like he had been tricked. He immediately cursed again. Which shameless old thing actually threw stones at people? Do you still have any morals? Ji Fenglu was infuriated once again. Bai Meng instead raised a hand and pressed it against his shoulder, his gaze lighting up as he stared at the gravel covering the field. The reason why no one dared to attack the fog was that they did not understand the power of this seven-colored fog. They were afraid that the magic tools and magic treasures in their hands would be destroyed if they came into contact with the poison. However, they did not expect that they could borrow the gravel in this field. Bai Meng waved at everyone and pointed at the gravel in the field. He then pointed at Ji Fenglu, indicating for everyone to copy what he had done just now. Everyone's face lit up. Without a word, they swept up a large amount of gravel on the ground and fiercely pushed it in the direction where Yu Qianzhou's curses came from. In an instant, the earth-shattering gravel shot into the fog with a whooshing sound. When the rain of gravel rushed into the fog, Yu Qianzhou immediately guessed what it was. So many. He was a bit dumbfounded. F***CK. He hurriedly jumped into a trench at the side. Above his head were the shadows of locusts that were as dense as rain. That sound was truly frightening. Don't look at it as just rocks. There were quite a few tribulation stage experts among them. When those rocks attacked, they could casually break through a wall. Killing ordinary mortals was like cutting vegetables. Even if a cultivator was hit, they would not feel good. When there was no more movement, just as he jumped out, he immediately heard an earth-shattering sound surging towards him. As he jumped back again. When there was no more movement again, he immediately jumped out and flew away on his flying sword. As he turned around, he roared, "A bunch of shameless people, just you wait." Everyone rolled up the gravel again. Although they knew that this wouldn't do anything to him, it was also a way to vent their anger. Even old Xin, who was at the side, couldn't help but join in the fun. That brat was really too arrogant. He chuckled there. Hearing that flustered and exasperated voice gradually fading away, thousands of people laughed loudly. They finally let out a sigh of relief. However, when they saw the corpses all over the field, they immediately couldn't laugh anymore. With such dismembered corpses, they couldn't even tell whose they belonged to. Even if they wanted to collect them, they couldn't. The leader of the group thought about it and called for the disciples of the sect to dig many deep pits on the ground. The surrounding corpses were swept into the pits and then directly buried. They had no choice but to do this. No matter what, they were from the same sect. They couldn't let their fellow disciples' corpses be exposed in the wilderness. As for the storage pouches, they tried their best to identify which sect they belonged to. If they couldn't, then whoever picked it up could keep it. After flying away on his flying sword, Yu Qianzhou stopped in front of the vague shadow of a dense forest. He was a little hesitant to go in. He kept saying that this was the misty forest, but he didn't see a single tree in the periphery. Only here did he see one. There was also that colorful fog. In this desolate and boundless desert, even though the wind was blowing continuously, it couldn't blow away the fog that enveloped this place. It really made people feel a little uneasy. He had already experienced the power of this colorful fog. When he first came in, he thought that since he had taken the Rui pill, he wouldn't be afraid of any poison. However, after a while he immediately felt that something was wrong. Although it didn't hurt or itch, he felt that his consciousness was gradually blurring. His whole body was numb and he couldn't even move a finger. Subconsciously he shouted that something was wrong. He was too careless. He was going to die here today. Unexpectedly, at the critical moment, his abdomen warmed up and a warm current flowed through his whole body. His consciousness also gradually became clear and he was slowly able to move. However, he felt that there was something in his body that seemed to be spinning silk from a cocoon. It was extracting something from every part of his body, and it was flowing towards his dantian. When he looked inside, he found that the head of the nascent soul in his dantian was shining with a golden light. It gave off the feeling of the Vairocana Buddha, and it was very solemn. Strands of colorful threads flowed into his dantian, and were then inhaled by the nascent soul through its nose. Yu Qianzhou suddenly realized that the golden bead that had sunk into the nascent soul's body had a miraculous effect. Without a doubt, those colorful threads should be the colorful fog that had invaded his body. Even the Rui pill couldn't cure the poison, but it was actually absorbed by the nascent soul. Thinking about it, he really had to thank this golden bead. At every critical moment, it would always help him turn misfortunes into blessings. It was very magical and he didn't know what it was. However, there was no doubt that it was a good treasure. Looking around, it was quiet and the colorful fog was slowly drifting. Behind such bright colors, there was a sense of eeriness and an indescribable strangeness. Perhaps it had something to do with the dead silence. He walked slowly and stopped beside a big tree. This tree was completely black and it had branches but no leaves. It was a bare tree and it seemed that these trees had died a long time ago. Looking at the big trees on the side, including those in the dense forest, they were also all black. There were almost no weeds growing on the ground and it was also pitch black. On the contrary, there were some hairy things that looked like grass under each tree. He remembered that third brother Exen once said that his master had come here to collect poisonous grass, but he didn't see any other grass. Could it be this thing? He wanted to collect some to study and see if he could poison someone to death. Maybe it would be useful in the future. But after thinking about it, he gave up. He didn't understand these things, and when he had the chance to ask third brother Xian's master, he could come back whenever he wanted. For now, he should try not to touch anything here. Should he go in and take a look? Yu Qianzhou hesitated for a while. If it wasn't for the golden bead, he would have been poisoned to death. If he encountered something more powerful, he really didn't know if he could handle it. Looking inside his dantian again, he saw that his nascent soul was still absorbing the colorful threads. He didn't know how long it would take. It was just absorbing and not spitting. Wouldn't it be stuffed to death? Woo. Woo. From the depths of the forest came an unknown sound, echoing in the empty black forest. This sound was the only sound left in the silence, and it made people's hair stand on end. Yu Qianzhou carefully looked around and both his ears were almost pricked up, trying to hear where the sound came from. However, it was difficult to distinguish and he could only guess that it came from the depths of the forest or maybe very far away. The sound suddenly disappeared. Damn it! If I can't poison to death, how can I be scared by a broken forest? If something is wrong, I'll just run. What's there to be afraid of? Yu Qianzhou coughed twice and his voice echoed in the forest. He took out a black flame flying sword from his sleeve and jumped on it. Then he waved his hand and pointed around and recited loudly, "Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue and purple, who holds the colorful ribbon and dances in the sky. After the rain comes the setting sun and the mountains pass in waves." After he finished reciting the poem, he suddenly felt emboldened. He thought to himself, in this kind of situation, only a poem by a great person who had defeated all kinds of evil spirits could boost his courage. Forget about those **ta men signs. Then his whole body surged with black flame to protect himself, and a few dozen black flame flying swords and blue flame flying swords flashed out to accompany him. When he felt that it was safe, he rode his sword and flew at a constant speed into the depths of the forest. The colorful fog in front of him was getting thicker and thicker, and his vision was getting worse and worse. He almost couldn't see anything in front of him. Yu Qianzhou slowed down and let a few blue flame flying swords lead the way. He felt that the terrain was getting higher and the black trees were getting fewer and fewer. It seemed that he was climbing to the top of a mountain. Damn it! What's in here? Yu Qianzhou didn't know how long he had been flying. Just as he was muttering to himself, the scene in front of him suddenly opened up, and he came out of the colorful fog. Yu Qianzhou looked around in surprise, and found that he was already at the top of a mountain in the shape of a basin. The whole mountain was like a huge basin and he could still see the colorful fog around him, but the inside of the basin was clear and he could see everything clearly. Below him was a huge depression, and this depression was not simple. It was actually all golden, and he didn't know if it was made of brass or gold. In the middle of the flat yellow metal ground, there was a wide platform that was tens of meters tall, and it was also golden. It looked like an altar. Chapter 521. The strange thing was, not only was there no rainbow fog in the basin, but there was also no fog in the sky above the basin. The clear sky was like blue velvet. That's not right. Yu Qianzhou rubbed his chin and thought. It was said that the fog forest was shrouded in rainbow fog all year round. There was such a big gap in the sky, it was impossible for the cultivators flying above not to see it. Yu Qianzhou's gaze fell on the altar. There seemed to be something hanging there. Who cares? If it's dangerous, I'll go and take a look. Yu Qianzhou slowly flew down on his sword and was constantly vigilant of his surroundings. In the end, he smoothly landed on the golden altar. He kept his flying sword and black flame and turned to look at his surroundings. It was still so quiet. Standing in the middle of the altar, he looked at the towering black mountains around him. It was solemn and grand. He felt so small. The blue velvet sky, the black mountains, and the golden ground. These three pure colors formed a strong contrast. Looking up at the sky, he could not help but yearn for the blue sky, as if the sky was his home. Who has nothing better to do? Yu Qianzhou muttered and looked at the entire altar. The altar, which was tens of meters tall, was built in the shape of 4 steps. The area at the top of the altar was probably more than 100 square meters. 4 golden pillars about 2 meters tall and covered in runes were erected at the 4 corners of the altar. On the side of each pillar facing the center of the altar, there were 3 ancient characters. Yu Qianzhou moved closer and vaguely guessed what it was. He did not know if it was right, but it seemed to be called Immortal Ascension Stage. Immortal Ascension Stage? Is it a place for immortal ascension? Yu Qianzhou rubbed his chin with one hand and rolled his eyes while his other hand touched the golden pillar. He then clicked his tongue and said, "Good boy. Such a big place is actually built with gold. Damn it, they're too rich. Damn it. Who are you kidding? A place for immortal ascension is built with gold? Are immortals this cheap? It seems to be a sacrificial ground of some ancient race." He hugged the large piece of gold and touched it. He shook his head regretfully. This thing was no longer of much use to him. A curved golden pole was erected on this golden pillar, and a golden chain hung down from it. At the end of the pole hung an arm-length golden horn that was engraved with runes. It was right above his head. What the hell? You should be fine if I touch it. It's still elastic. Yu Qianzhou stretched out his hand to grab the horn and tugged it down. He discovered that the curved golden pole was quite elastic. When he pulled, it bent, and when he let go, it bounced back. Looking around, he estimated that the only thing that could move was the golden pole with the horn hanging on it. Everything else was hard. Strange. Where did that sound come from? Could it be that it didn't come from here but from somewhere else? Just as Yu Qianzhou was silently cursing, the bugle horn above his head suddenly emitted 3 long and deafening sounds. Woo, woo, woo. Yu Qianzhou covered his ears with his teeth and quickly dodged to the side. Swoosh swoosh. A bunch of black flying swords instantly appeared. His face twitched and he stared at the swaying golden horn with bewilderment. After staring at it for a while, he realized that the golden horn had stopped swaying slowly. There was a powerful aura quietly spreading in the air. This thing could actually sound on its own. Could it be a magic treasure? Or did I trigger some restriction when I touched it? No, that's not right. I heard this sound when I was outside. No one should have touched it then. Thinking of this, Yu Qianzhou looked around again. Other than him, there was no one, no ghost, no immortal, or any small animals. I don't believe it. Yu Qianzhou slowly moved over, and the 1,000 flying swords behind him were ready to go. Finally, he grabbed the horn in his hand. He touched it left and right, but he couldn't find anything. A black light flashed behind him, and with a soft hiss, the golden horn was in his arms. He raised it up and squinted at the mouth of the horn. There was nothing special about it. It was not even as effective as binoculars. The only special thing was that it was made of pure gold. It would take a long time to bring it to the mortal world. There were no germs, right? Yu Qianzhou looked at it, pulled up his clothes and wiped the mouth of the horn. He then got into position, put it in his mouth and blew hard. In the end, not even a fart came out. This guy had always been the rebellious type. He heard the sound just now. Why didn't I blow? He circulated his primordial essence and blew hard into the mouth of the horn. Woo woo. Sure enough, it sounded. The loud sound echoed in the entire basin for a long time before it stopped. Yu Qianzhou held the horn with a serious expression. This thing was obviously not for mortals. With the strength of mortals, it was impossible for them to blow it. It was for cultivators. Looking around, he realized that the entire basin seemed to have been dug out. It should have been dug out from the middle of a mountain, and then covered with tens of thousands of square meters of gold. This was not something that could be done with simple manpower and financial resources. Could it be that it was built by ancient cultivators? Also, this place was shrouded in colorful fog. With such a powerful poison, mortals would not be able to enter. He couldn't find an answer to this series of questions, and he reckoned that no one would be able to answer them. Suddenly, the originally clear sky was filled with the faint sound of thunder. Xianxia abruptly raised his head, only to see dark clouds stirring in the blue velvet sky. At first, the dark clouds the size of a fist rotated, but they grew bigger and bigger. Slowly, they covered the entire sky above, and the basin was suddenly pitch black. The sound of thunder became louder and louder, shaking the entire basin. Rumble. Bang. A bolt of lightning flashed in the dark clouds, followed by sinister snaking bolts of lightning. The whole basin was lit up, and then it was dark, accompanied by strong winds. Such a huge commotion occurred in the basin, but outside the dense fog forest, the cultivators of the various countries did not notice any movement in the sky. They were discussing how to deal with Xianxia's breakout at night. Although they did not know whether Xianxia was telling the truth, they would rather believe it. It was better to be prepared. Little did they know that Xianxia was looking left and right in shock, and he was like a small boat in a tempestuous storm. This scene was truly a ghastly sight. He did not know what was going on. In any case, he was prepared to escape at any time. However, what was surprising was that the wind gradually subsided, and the surroundings became blue again. Normal light reappeared in the basin. The blue velvet was compressing the dark clouds of lightning and thunder, compressing it into a black hole. The lightning in the black hole was as fast as thousands of snakes. Xianxia's ears were buzzing with the sound of thunder. He looked up at the sky with his mouth wide open, looking a little silly. He did not know what the hell was going on in the sky. There was only thunder and no rain. At this moment, the black hole of lightning and thunder gradually rotated as if it was going to spit something out. As it rotated, the colorful fog around the basin began to be sucked in, gradually covering the entire sky. The gathered fog began to be sucked into the black hole. Suddenly, a dazzling white light flashed in the black hole and a figure flashed in the white light. Before Xianxia could react, he suddenly found that there was someone in front of him. He was shocked, and the flying swords behind him all moved in front of him with a swoosh. He saw a golden-robed middle-aged man staring at him coldly. That golden robe was very compatible with the environment. He asked, "Were you the one who blew the immortal ascension?" Xianxia did not reply but shouted back, "Who are you?" The middle-aged man was obviously stunned. He looked at the golden horn in his hands and then at the golden chain that had been cut off. He said indifferently, "How dare you cut off the immortal ascension? Shut the f***ck up. Who the hell are you? Otherwise don't blame me for being rude," Xianxia roared. He was actually a little nervous. This golden-robed man's entrance was too awesome. He had never seen such a flashy entrance. It actually caused dark clouds to gather and lightning to flash and thunder to rumble. "You don't know who I am?" The golden-robed man looked at him for a while and said in shock, "I can't see through your cultivation." The cold expression on his face gradually eased. With a faint smile, he cupped his hands and replied, "I am the celestial realm's emissary. I heard the immortal ascension's call, and have specially come to welcome you to the celestial realm." Celestial realm? What did you say? Say it again? Xianxia was dumbfounded. The golden-robed man was a little confused. He smiled again and replied, "I am the celestial realm's emissary. I heard the immortal ascension's call, and have specially come to welcome you to the celestial realm." Dang! The horn in Xianxia's hand fell to the ground. He pointed at him and stammered, "You mean you are a deity from the celestial realm?" He could not help but look up at the spinning black hole that was still filled with lightning. "For the people of the mortal world, you can call me that." The golden-robed man smiled politely. "For a cultivator like you to reach such a cultivation level before ascending to the celestial realm, it is rare to see one in 1,000 years. After ascending to the celestial realm, I believe you can directly enter the exalted immortal level. I am not worthy of being called a deity." Although Xianxia's personality wasn't that great, his mental fortitude was absolutely top-notch. He gradually relaxed his mind, looked around his feet and said, "Holy-ish*t, this damn place is really a place for immortal ascension. The flying swords all scurried back into the storage bag. He now believed that this guy was really a deity. He had no choice but to believe it. The phenomenon in the sky was extraordinary. Since the other party had already regarded him as a master, he might as well pretend to be a master first and sound him out. If it did not work, he would quickly leave. Of course, the immortal ascension stage is naturally a place for immortal ascension, the golden-robed man said politely. Although Yu Qianzhou was still a little surprised, he saw that the other party bullied the weak and feared the strong. Even if he was a deity, he would not be able to do so. Therefore, he walked around the golden-robed man a few times with his hands behind his back. As he sized him up, he asked, "Do you often come here to welcome people to immortal ascension?" "No." The golden-robed man cupped his hands. "There are 72 worlds in the mortal world. This world has stopped for countless years. No one has ascended to the celestial realm. You are the first in countless years. At the same time, you are also the person with the highest cultivation level in the 72 worlds. Chapter 522. Hehe. My cultivation level is average. I'm passable. Yu Qianzhou laughed and pointed around. What's going on here? Why did you come the moment I blew the horn? The golden-robed man's expression turned solemn. A long time ago, an expert from the immortal world used his profound cultivation to break through the void and set up an array here. Once the immortal ascension is blown, it can reach the heavens. Our emissaries will open the corresponding passage to receive you. Then why did I hear the immortal ascension being blown by itself? Yu Qianzhou asked curiously. The golden-robed man smiled. You may not know this, but our emissaries also blow the immortal world's emissaries. Once the immortal ascension is blown, the mortal world's immortal ascension will resonate. Cultivators who have reached a certain level of cultivation will be able to hear the call no matter how far they are. They will follow the sound to the immortal ascension stage and ascend to the immortal world. As he spoke, he pointed at the basin. If your cultivation level is not high enough, you won't be able to hear the horn no matter how loud it is. The range of the array? You mean within this basin? Does that include the forest outside the basin? Yu Qianzhou asked. The range of the array is limited to the basin, the golden-robed man said patiently. This was because he had met Yu Qianzhou who he could not see through. If it was someone with a lower cultivation level, they would not have the patience to chat with him. That's strange. Then why can I hear the horn from outside? Yu Qianzhou's face was filled with confusion, but he couldn't tell the other party that he was only at the nascent soul stage, yet he could hear it. Was the quality of his immortal ascension not up to standard? Or was it broken after years of disrepair? However, this was not a good question to ask. If he were to find out that he was pretending to be powerful in front of the other party, he might even be killed. This was an immortal from the immortal world. Who knew what powers he had? What made him even more curious was that the golden bead in his body was so magical that even an immortal could not see through his cultivation level. Does one have to reach a certain level of cultivation to ascend to immortality? Can those with insufficient cultivation be promoted? Yu Qianzhou asked with a glimmer of hope. He was quite interested in becoming a legendary immortal. When the time came, he could bring his entire family and his subordinates along to bask in the limelight. That would be great. The golden-robed man was stunned for a moment before he said, If your cultivation isn't high enough, you won't be able to withstand the might of the immortal ascension passageway. But he paused for a moment before continuing, if there's a great immortal protecting him or if there's some powerful protective immortal treasure, it won't be a problem. However, I'm afraid people who possess formidable immortal treasures or experts whose cultivation has reached the great immortal realm would disdain to do such a thing. Damn it! Isn't this the same as telling me that there's no hope? I don't have that many connections in the immortal world. If I had those connections, would I still be talking nonsense with you here? One look and I can tell that you're just an errand boy. Yu Qianzhou cursed silently. Seeing that he was still dawdling, the golden-robed man had been a guide for so many years, but this was the first time he had seen such a person. He thought to himself, an expert is indeed an expert. He's studying there slowly and calmly. He's not as emotional as the other ascenders. He could only remind him, you'd better hurry up and ascend with me. This immortal passage can't be open forever. If there's no response, it'll automatically close later. Oh no. How am I supposed to get rid of him? Yu Qianzhou looked at the black hole in the sky and tried to find something to talk about. I thought that ascending to immortality is a process of having thousands of rays of light above your head and stepping on colorful auspicious clouds. I didn't expect it to be through this black hole. Could it be that this seven-colored mist was the legendary seven-colored auspicious cloud? Isn't that a little too vicious? Colorful auspicious clouds. The golden-robed man was stunned. He looked up and saw the colorful fog swirling with the black hole. Suddenly, his expression changed and he said in shock, What's going on? I was going to ask you what's going on. Don't you know? Yu Qianzhou glanced at him inadvertently and was stunned. He saw that the golden-robed man was looking at him and his hands were trembling. He could not help but ask, What's wrong with you? The colorful fog. Is it the soul-transforming smoke? Have I been poisoned by the legendary soul-transforming smoke? How could this be? Why? The golden-robed man raised his head with great difficulty and looked at him in horror. I have no enmity with you. Why do you want to harm me? Why do you want to harm me with the soul-transforming smoke? You must have the antidote, you must have the antidote, please give me the antidote, save me. His voice became weaker and weaker. In the end he finally could not say anything. His whole body was frozen in a state of panic as he stretched out his hand to ask for help. Yu Qianzhou also froze in place and looked at the golden-robed man in shock. This situation was so familiar. It was the same as the dozens of poisoned cultivators from the Jinshan kingdom that he had peeked at in the fog. Could it be that even immortals could not resist the poison of the colorful fog? What's wrong with you? Yu Qianzhou asked again weakly. Then he asked a few more times but there was no response. Only then did he confirm that the golden-robed man was dead. He looked up at the still spinning black hole speechlessly. The colorful fog around it was still being sucked in slowly. The colorful fog. The soul-transforming smoke. He muttered and frowned deeply. A lot of mysteries surged in his mind. The golden-robed man obviously did not expect to see the colorful fog in this place. That was the soul-transforming smoke he mentioned. Where did it come from? In short, it would not appear for no reason. It was obviously left behind by someone. Or maybe it was deliberately left behind by someone. When the immortal ascension passage was opened, the spinning black hole naturally sucked in the colorful fog. Those who came out of the black hole would suffer if they were not prepared. Even immortals could not resist the soul-transforming smoke. It was definitely not a coincidence that it was set up at the immortal ascension stage. Yu Qianzhou suddenly felt a sense of conspiracy. It seemed that the entire misty forest was set up by someone to prevent anyone from entering and at the same time, not even immortals. Perhaps it was mainly targeted at immortals. Who could have such a grand plan? Was it a cultivator from the cultivation world? That was absolutely impossible. As Yu Qianzhou's eyes flashed, a bolt of lightning flashed out of the black hole and formed a twisted bolt of lightning in the sky above the basin. The black hole in the sky spun faster and faster. Finally, it turned into a dot and slowly disappeared. After the colorful fog in the sky lost its suction force, it began to drift back and return to the surroundings outside the basin. The sky reappeared, but it was filled with stars, twinkling brightly. The golden-robed man opposite him was still begging with a terrified expression. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and sighed. Immortal brother, I'm sorry. I didn't know that I could blow an immortal to death with just a casual blow. I really didn't mean it. Please rest in peace. It's not safe to stay here for long. I'll take my leave first. Yu Qianzhou took out a few small silver balls and scattered them in all directions. It would be convenient if he wanted to come again in the future. He kicked the golden horn on the ground. It was also a treasure. He picked it up and was about to put it into his storage bag when he stopped and shook his head. He thought that it was better not to take it. If he attracted a few immortals because of this thing, he would be killed. After a moment of hesitation, he walked to the pillar with the horn and pulled down the golden chain. 2 green flames lit up between his thumb and index finger, and he reconnected the broken chain. After he let go, the horn hung on the pillar again. It's returned to its owner. I just came here for a stroll. It's none of my business. Yu Qianzhou shrugged. He threw out a green flying sword and jumped on it. With a whoosh, he flew to the top of the mountain. Halfway, he looked back and seemed to have thought of something. He rode the sword and flew back. Jumping back onto the altar, the cyan flying sword under his feet flipped in the air and bounced into the air. With a buzz sound, It emitted a cyan flame and turned into a flaming sword. Then it went straight toward the top of the golden-robed man's head. In an instant, vigorous green flames spurted out from the collar, sleeves, and all the gaps in the golden robe. As Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and waved, the green flames swam out of the golden robe like a dozen fire snakes and entered his palm. The golden robe fell to the ground. The person wearing the robe had disappeared without a trace. Dang dang dang. A bracelet that looked like refined steel bounced a few times on the golden altar. Yu Qianqiu walked over and picked up the golden robe. Other than a few pieces of immortal underwear, there was nothing else. Damn. Are immortals so poor? There are no elixirs or immortal treasures. Yu Qianqiu unfolded the entire golden robe and looked at it again. Indeed, he did not find anything valuable. The quality of the clothes was okay, but he did not know what material it was woven from. He lifted the robe and said helplessly, 3 years for the new one, 3 years for the old one, and another 3 years for the sewing and patching. I'm a child from a poor family. I don't have so many bad habits. I'll make do with it. Maybe it'll be useful in the future. He stuffed it into his storage bag and then grabbed the immortal underwear to check it again. He still did not find anything. In the end, a surging green flame surged out and turned the immortal underwear into ashes. It seemed that he had forgotten the theory of 3 years for the new and 3 years for the old. Poor. As he shook his head, his eyes fell on the bracelet that looked like refined copper that had rolled to the edge of the altar. The bracelet lay there quietly. It looked very ordinary and not easy to attract attention. His eyebrows twitched subconsciously. He had vaguely guessed something. He picked up the bracelet and weighed it in his hand. It was neither light nor heavy. It looked unremarkable. It was 2 fingers wide, grayish-green, slightly flat, and had no decorations. There were no welded seams on it. It was a seamless whole. I hope it doesn't disappoint me, Yu Qianqiu muttered softly. He held it in his hand and began to inject his divine sense into it. As soon as his divine sense entered, he immediately fell into a space. Chapter 523. Yu Qianqiu immediately winked and laughed. This bracelet was indeed mysterious. It actually hid a space similar to a storage bag. However, he soon couldn't laugh anymore. The space was not small. This room could match the capacity of 3 storage bags, but there was nothing inside. It was empty. It was really a space, an empty room. He retracted his divine sense and was a little stunned. Did a dignified immortal really not have anything valuable on him? What was the use of this bracelet with a large capacity? In terms of storage space, which could be bigger than Utopia. Unwilling to give up, he injected his divine sense to check again. The result made him really speechless. There was actually a pile of ores and other things inside, piling up half the room. He retracted his divine sense again. Yu Qianqiu looked around suspiciously. Could it be that his eyes were playing tricks on him? Or did he see a living ghost? No, a living immortal. Immortals could also be haunting? It couldn't be that his eyes were playing tricks on him. Yu Qianqiu looked around with a fierce gaze. So what if it was a ghost? I can do whatever I want in the demon region. Why would I be afraid of a guy who just died? He injected his divine sense again and Yu Qianqiu was instantly dumbfounded. It actually became empty again. This time it would be a lie to say that he wasn't afraid. He only felt the hair on his back stand up. He looked around. In the huge empty space, he was the only one staying on an ancient golden altar. He couldn't hear any sound at all. Long live Chairman Mao. Long live Chairman Mao. He muttered in his heart 10 times in a row. Immediately his timidity disappeared. He stood upright in the center of the golden altar and looked around coldly. He raised the bracelet in his hand and carefully injected his divine sense into it, observing the internal structure of the entire bracelet. Damn it! After Yu Qianqiu saw it clearly, he couldn't help but laugh. He realized that he was purely scaring himself. It turned out that there were 10 ring-shaped spaces inside the bracelet. Among these 10 spaces, a few rooms were filled with things and a few were originally empty. It was obvious that his divine sense had entered an empty room for the first time. The second time it entered a room filled with things. The third time it was empty again. In the end, he thought he had seen a ghost. Heaving a sigh of relief, he found a room to store his items and checked what kind of treasures were inside. There were 5 identical swords stuck in a small pile of silver sand. It was very likely that they were immortal artifacts from the immortal world. This immediately piqued his interest. As he tried to summon it, a cold light flashed and landed in his hand. Its appearance was similar to the flying swords used in the cultivation world, only the style of the handle was different. Xianxia used his finger to caress the cold blade of the sword. It was cold to the touch, and there were undulating lines on the blade that he could not understand. He could feel that there was a powerful and restrained aura hidden within. This was something that the flying swords of the cultivation world did not have. Once it was activated, its power would definitely not be small. The cold light flowed past and pierced towards the altar. Shwa! It directly penetrated the thick golden platform and stopped at the hilt. Xianxia clicked his tongue as he pulled out the sword. The sharpness of the sword was indeed incomparable to the flying swords of the cultivation world. Just now he had only made it go into free fall, but it was already able to pierce through metal effortlessly. Such a good sword, he naturally wanted to try to control it. He wanted to separate a strand of divine sense into the sword to make it easier to control. Unexpectedly, there was already a strand of divine sense residing in it. Just as his divine sense was about to invade, it was driven out by that strand of divine sense. Obviously, it was left behind by the original owner. Thus, he tried several times in a row and used all his energy to erase that strand of divine sense. However, the other party was as majestic as a mountain. With his cultivation, he could not do anything to it at all. Xianxia had to give up. Looking at such a good sword, it was really a pity that he could not control it. It was not like he could hold it in his hand and use it as an ordinary weapon. It would be more convenient to use his black fire broadsword. He helplessly threw it back into the bracelet. He took turns to try all 5 swords inside, but the result was the same. Not a single one was something he could control with his cultivation. Suddenly, he remembered that his master was asking old ancestor Nan Ming to refine a spiritual treasure. He wondered if he could give this sword to his master. With his cultivation, would he be able to erase the divine sense inside? If he could, since there were 5 swords inside, he should give one to his master as a show of filial respect. His divine sense continued to search for treasures in the space. Several large iron chests without lids caught his attention. When his divine sense spread out to take a look, he was immediately stunned. There were low-grade spirit stones, mid-grade spirit stones, high-grade spirit stones. There was even a chest with a pile of purple spirit stones. Among them there were more than a dozen black spirit stones. They were actually supreme-grade spirit stones and divine-grade spirit stones. He took out a few black spirit stones to check and confirmed that they were divine-grade spirit stones. Xianxia was speechless. It seemed that divine-grade spirit stones were also a circulating currency in the immortal world. Otherwise, the chances of these immortals running errands would not be high. Surprisingly, there were also low-grade things like low-grade spirit stones in the immortal world. But when he thought about it, it made sense. After all, they were things that contained spiritual energy. The immortal world probably had more of them. After putting away the spirit stones, he looked at the sky and couldn't help but sigh. If only he could get more high-grade spirit stones in the immortal world. Then his subordinates wouldn't be short of money. But then again, if he really had the cultivation to go to the immortal world, he would probably be invincible in the mortal world. Why would he still work so hard to get spirit stones? Looking at the shining stars in the sky, his heart suddenly skipped a beat, and the true essence in his body became a little restless. Xianxia exclaimed. This feeling was a little familiar. It seemed to have appeared when he was cultivating the fire and water arts. Could it be? He looked around and saw that he was in a golden world. Looking at the stars in the sky, he became a little excited. Could it be that the opportunity to cultivate a new art had arrived? Could it be the Western Star Chart's gold character art? Xianxia looked at the golden world below the altar again and let out a deep breath. He thought to himself, I'm afraid that's the case. I understand now. It wasn't a coincidence that I could successfully cultivate the fire and water arts. When I comprehended the fire art, I happened to be next to the earth fire. When I comprehended the water art, I happened to be next to the 1,000-mile lake on Obedient Island. This was because I had the corresponding attribute as a primer to stimulate the meridians in the star chart to form the art. No wonder he thought he had memorized the remaining 3 star maps by heart, and often exhausted his mental energy to no avail. Turned out that this was the secret. That's not right. When I comprehended the earth art, didn't I also sit on the ground? If I have the corresponding attribute, Why can't I stimulate the same art? Xianxia thought hard for a while, but he still couldn't figure out where the problem was. Feeling the turbulent true essence in his body, he decided not to think so much. He would first see if the opportunity to cultivate the Western star chart's gold character art had arrived. He immediately sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to get rid of the distracting thoughts in his mind. He brought out the changing trajectories of the Western star chart that he had memorized by heart. The moment the star chart appeared, his mind entered a clear and bright state. His mind was void of everything and he was swimming in the sea of stars. The changing trajectories of the stars gradually became clear in his mind. His brain quickly calculated the changes of every star in the Western star chart. With such complicated changes of the stars, if he didn't enter a state of selflessness and get rid of all distracting thoughts, how could he experience the changes of every star? His mind was dead silent. The changing trajectories of the stars gradually became traceable. Those fixed stars in the sky transformed into bones, flesh, and meridians in his mind. Those moving stars gradually formed the trajectory of true essence. It became clearer and gradually perfected. When he had completely mastered it, Xianxia was still immersed in it without any joy or sorrow. The true essence in his body had already started to move according to the perfect trajectory. Xianxia sat cross-legged on the golden altar. He was surrounded by mountains and above his head was the starry sky. His mind was as calm as still water. The originally empty mountain basin gradually became alive. If one looked closely, there wouldn't be any changes, but it made people feel as if it was alive. Perhaps only Xianxia himself understood. He could feel the changes in his surroundings through his soul. Many white fairies were emerging from the golden altar and flying towards him happily. His open pores were happily accepting them. Countless white fairies integrated into the true essence in his body and gathered into an army of streams, rushing towards his dantian. As the nascent soul in his dantian breathed, it continuously absorbed them. After a while, the nascent soul stopped absorbing the white fairies. The rejected white fairies began to look for another way out. They began to rush towards Xianxia's limbs and bones. They drilled into every cell and filled in. The cells were originally occupied by the water and fire elements. Seeing that there were new guests, they immediately compressed again, leaving an equal space for the white gold elements. At this moment, a gratified smile appeared on Xianxia's face. It was a success. Suddenly, his face stiffened and he opened his eyes. Before he could fill every cell with gold elements, he forcefully stopped the absorption. He slowly stood up and looked at the golden altar that he was sitting cross-legged on. He saw that the 4 golden pillars around it were obviously thinner, and the surface of the altar also seemed to be thinner. He looked around and was a little depressed. Could it be that the golden gold art could only absorb gold? Where would he get so much gold for him to absorb in the future? If he absorbed all the gold elements, this formation would probably be destroyed. He really didn't know what would happen then. Moreover, this formation might be useful in the future. This was the only channel to the immortal world that he knew of. He really couldn't destroy it for the time being. He sighed slightly and didn't think too much about it. What he wanted to know the most was what benefits he would get from cultivating the golden gold art. He raised his hand and spread out his fingers. The golden gold art operated according to his will, and a layer of golden glove instantly appeared on his palm. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Could it be that the golden gold art could make gold appear out of thin air? Then he wouldn't have to worry about not having money to spend in the secular world in the future. The bitter smile on his face hadn't disappeared when his expression suddenly changed. He felt that the true essence in his dantian was agitated, as if something big was going to happen. Chapter 524. Without saying a word, he put the bracelet on his wrist and immediately closed his eyes. The red and black crystal beads in his dantian were originally revolving around his nascent soul, but for some reason they were now motionless. The true essence in his dantian was also revolving at a uniform speed with the 2 beads, like an ancient nebula that had lost its momentum, immediately surging around his dantian. What was going on? Xianxia didn't know what to do in the face of this abnormal phenomenon. The situation in his dantian was different from others, and he didn't even have anyone to ask for advice. The only thing he could do now was to stay put and not forcibly interfere with it, so he decided to wait and see. Suddenly he seemed to see the nascent soul in his body move, and his attention immediately focused on the nascent soul. He saw the nascent soul's pink little face was red, and its little head was raised and lowered repeatedly, and even its little arms and legs were kicking a few times. Looking at the situation, it seemed that something was blocking its breathing. Xianxia was a little panicked. Could it be that the poison of the colorful fog had taken effect? Damn it! If the nascent soul was poisoned to death, wouldn't my cultivation be crippled? Just when he didn't know what to do, the nascent soul suddenly raised its head, opened its mouth and sneezed. Pooh! A white light was spat out. Then the nascent soul comfortably took a few breaths and gradually calmed down. Xianxia was a little relieved as long as the nascent soul was fine. His attention turned to the white light flying around his dantian. He didn't know what it was, but it actually blocked the nascent soul's breathing. At this moment, as the nascent soul returned to normal, the two red and black beads that stopped at the nascent soul's waist gradually began to rotate again. Yin and yang moved, and the qi was born. The scattered true essence in his dantian gradually followed the rotation, and the chaos slowly returned to order. The speed of the white light flying around his dantian was limited by the rotating true essence, and Xianxia finally saw its original appearance. It turned out to be a white crystal bead, and it looked the same as the red and black beads, only the color was different. Xianxia immediately understood that it was a crystal formed when the nascent soul absorbed the metal element. But what was up with this guy? Little red and little black had been so obedient since they were born, obediently drawing circles around their nascent soul, but it had to be a little naughty? As expected of Xiaobai, there might be something wrong with her brain. However, no matter how naughty little white was, it could not resist the general trend. The centripetal force generated by the revolving true essence gradually drew it to the nascent soul's side. It bumped into Little Red without thinking, and Little Red instantly glowed with a red light. Little White seemed to be frightened. Not long after it dodged, it was pulled back by the centripetal force, so it bumped into Little Black again. Little Black also glowed with a black light as if warning it. Little White retreated again, but it couldn't escape the centripetal force. Left with no choice, it gently inserted itself between Little Red and Little Black and emitted a weak white light as if saying, "I'm also round, I can also emit light, give me a spot." After the red and black beads saw that the white bead also emitted light, the red and black lights of the two beads became even brighter. As they rotated, they leaned against each other and finally gave up a spot for Little White. The distance between the three beads suddenly became equal, forming a tripod, and they rotated around the waist of the nascent soul. Xianxia clicked his tongue in wonder. These three beads seemed to have a spirit of their own. Just when he breathed a sigh of relief and thought that it was over, the light of the three beads became brighter and brighter. The light of the three beads became brighter and brighter. The red, black, and white lights shone on each other, enveloping the nascent soul that was sitting cross-legged. At the same time, the three beads rotated faster and faster, as if they were a little too excited to have a new friend join them. These three guys were too naughty. Xianxia just smiled knowingly, but he immediately couldn't smile. It seemed that there was a problem. These three guys were a little too naughty. The true essence in his body was stirred into a tornado, gradually sucking in the three pearls. In the end, all of the true essence in his dantian was gathered between the three pearls, compressing the true essence to an incomparably thick and solid state. The nascent soul had been wrapped by the true essence, and he couldn't see its true appearance, so he didn't know what happened to the nascent soul. Damn! What the hell were these three bastards doing? Xianxia, who had his eyes closed, was sweating from the pain on his forehead. As the three beads rotated faster and faster, there was nothing in his dantian for them to sweep over. As a result, the entire dantian was slowly shrinking. Damn. Xianxia immediately grabbed 2 large handfuls of high-grade spirit stones from a few iron boxes in his bracelet, and channeled the spiritual energy in dozens of spirit stones directly into his dantian. However, the spiritual energy was not enough to fill the gaps between the three beads, and they were swept in the blink of an eye. Xianxia didn't say anything. Now the first thing to do was to fill up his dantian, otherwise he would die of pain. This was internal strife. Handfuls of high-grade spirit stones were taken out, but unfortunately, it was still not enough for the three guys. 2 handfuls of purple top-grade spirit stones were taken out, and the majestic spiritual energy surged from the meridians to his dantian. A burst of coolness echoed in his dantian, and Xianxia felt so comfortable that he let out a moan. However, after a short moment of comfort, the spiritual chi of the 2 best-grade spirit stones in his hands was sucked dry, but the 3 guys were still there, like a whirlwind sweeping away the clouds, and in the blink of an eye the bulging spiritual chi was gone. Xianxia was a little flustered and he grabbed 2 handfuls of top-grade spirit stones in his hands and sucked them crazily. He wanted to drown the 3 guys with spiritual energy. But the 3 beads still did what they wanted. Who was afraid of who? Thus the 2 sides began to compete. Xianxia used all his strength to fill his dantian with spiritual energy, and the 3 beads coldly accepted everything that came their way. The sky gradually brightened. Outside the fog forest, the cultivators from various countries all looked embarrassed. Xianxia actually played them. He said that he would break out from here at night and everyone had made thorough preparations, but in the end, there was no movement from that guy at all. Everyone looked at each other and they all had the same thought in their hearts. How could they believe the enemy's words? Maybe Xianxia had already escaped somewhere else and they were still waiting here. Were they stupid? Thus, the cultivators from various countries all sent messages back, and sent out the news that Xianxia might have escaped and asked for close attention. And they would continue to stay here to search, to prevent Xianxia from escaping. After all, they didn't know what the situation was in other parts of the fog forest. If it was difficult to escape from other parts, then it would be meaningless for them to stay here. Of course, they wouldn't just wait here, sending out a large number of people to search around the fog forest. At this point, Xianxia had no idea how much time had passed. In short, close to 10,000 top-grade spirit stones had been completely absorbed by him. That was close to 100 million high-grade spirit stones. However, the 3 beads were still moving around. Xianxia gritted his teeth, grabbing a piece of divine-grade spirit stones from the dozen remaining in the box. The amount of spirit energy contained in these 2 shiny black spirit stones was immeasurable. With a slight inhalation, the majestic spirit energy rushed into Xianxia's meridians. It swelled so much that Xianxia almost threw them away. Enduring the excruciating pain from the spiritual energy rushing through his meridians, he slowly suppressed the absorption speed, pouring the spiritual energy into his dantian. That kind of pleasant feeling that made one's soul float in the clouds filled his entire body. Xianxia held the 2 spirit stones in his hand, moaning in comfort. The 2 black divine-grade spirit stones slowly changed color. After a long time, the black gradually turned into purple and then the purple slowly faded, turning into an amber-golden color, all the way until it was transparent and finally a deathly gray. When the spiritual energy inside the 2 divine-grade spirit stones was completely absorbed, the 3 beads' rotation speed also slowed down, stopping completely in the end. The dazzling tricolored light gradually dimmed. It seemed like they were tired of playing or were waiting for something. The mixed true essence began to slowly disperse, and the nascent soul wrapped in it gradually revealed its original appearance. What surprised Xianxia was that the chubby baby had lost all of its baby fat, turning into an innocent little boy, although it was still the same size as before. While Xianxia was looking at the baby in shock, the baby sitting cross-legged suddenly stretched his limbs, yawning loudly. His closed eyes slowly opened, looking around curiously. When he saw Xianxia's strand of divine sense staring at him, the baby also widened his eyes, looking at Xianxia. He can see my divine sense. Xianxia felt that the baby was looking into his eyes, so he tried to move his divine sense to the side of the baby, but the little boy also turned his head to look at him. As it turned out, this little boy really could see his divine sense. The 2 of them stared at each other for a long time. The little boy seemed to be a little tired, covering his mouth and yawning again. Then he sat cross-legged and took a deep breath. A strand of white true essence mixed with spiritual energy was sucked in by the little boy, and when he exhaled, it had already turned into a strand of pure white true essence. Just like this, he repeated the cycle of inhaling and exhaling. As he began to breathe again, the red, black and white beads began to rotate at a faster speed. When it reached a certain speed, it began to rotate at a constant speed. Everything returned to normal. Xianxia waited for a while and after confirming that there was no mistake, he opened his eyes. Looking up at the sky, he thought to himself, "It's already morning, those people outside must be very unhappy that they were stood up. What he didn't know was that he had been here for 3 days. Looking down at the golden altar, which was full of spirit stones that had exhausted their spiritual energy, he silently recalled the process of absorbing spiritual energy, and was shocked by the result. Not counting the top-grade spirit stones, tens of thousands of top-grade spirit stones were equivalent to 100 million top-grade spirit stones, and the 2 divine-grade spirit stones were equivalent to 200 million top-grade spirit stones. In other words, he had absorbed more than 300 million top-grade spirit stones in one go. Oh my God! The nascent soul in my body consumed 300 million top-grade spirit stones in one go? There's no benefit at all, just to stare at each other, and then what should I do? Xianxia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He touched his forehead, shook his head, and was slightly stunned. The nascent soul opened its eyes and stretched. According to Nongzhu, this was the phenomenon of breaking through to the crossing calamity stage. Chapter 525. He was pleasantly surprised. His divine sense quickly returned to his dantian to check. The nascent soul was still sitting cross-legged in his dantian, quietly refining and condensing the true essence. It was still the same nascent soul, but it had grown from a fat baby to a little boy. There was a white pearl at his waist. This was the change in his dantian. Looking at the condensed true essence that was as flexible as steel, Xianxia opened his eyes in excitement and rubbed his hands anxiously. How is this possible? How is this possible? He jumped from mid-stage nascent soul to early-stage tribulation passing. With a wave of his hand, he swept the dried spirit stones on the altar into utopia and calmed his excited emotions. Then he took out an ordinary flying sword and threw it into the air. Then he circulated his qi, driving the true essence in his body, and his shield of vigor quickly surged out. It was obviously different from the nascent soul protective aura. It was much more transparent and stable. With a point of his finger, the flying sword whistled toward him. With a clang, the flying sword was deflected and the protective aura was unscathed. He then retracted the protective aura with a face full of surprise. The flying sword flew back with a swoosh and entered his storage bag. Then he closed his eyes and opened his arms. Between his sleeves, one side was constantly glowing with green light, while the other side was flashing with black light. Green and black flying swords continuously surged out. After the total number of flying swords exceeded 1,000, they were still emerging. When the number reached nearly 3,000, he opened his eyes and exhaled. He looked at the green and black flying swords around him in surprise. Guiyuan sword technique, sword control. Xianxia shouted and moved his fingers like a swimming dragon. Suddenly, the 3,000 two-colored flying swords danced in the sky in the basin, sometimes like a swarm of bees, sometimes like a flying dragon. The swords moved according to his will. It was a spectacular scene. It seems that controlling 3,000 flying swords is still a little difficult. I can only control 2,000 at the same time with ease. Xianxia muttered to himself. He took a deep breath and flicked his sleeves. His whole body soared into the sky and quickly floated in mid-air. Activating the sword art, the 3,000 flying swords created all sorts of obstacles in the air. Xianxia's figure flashed, rapidly changing his figure among the obstacles, quickly shuttling back and forth, experiencing the pleasure of flying in the air after getting rid of the flying swords. In the past, when he was flying, he could only adopt a standing or squatting position at all times. This was sometimes a very disadvantageous thing in a complicated situation. But now he could change his posture and fly in the air as much as he wanted. Howl. He let out a long howl in midair, and his body quickly flashed out of the sword net barrier, flying in circles in the huge basin space. The 3,000 flying swords followed closely behind him. Xianxia looked back and smiled. With a thought in his mind, the 3,000 flying swords lit up with either green or black flames at the same time. The green and black lights intertwined, creating a lonely but unique radiance. That scene was simply breathtaking. He was like a phoenix that had just been reborn from the ashes, dragging a huge and gorgeous tail flame behind him as he soared in the sky. It was a very beautiful scene, but he was the only one admiring himself, stroking his hair coquettishly, dancing alone. Experiencing the more powerful energy in his body than ever before, it was enough to support him to fly in the air. That feeling was wonderful and very satisfying. Xianxia dragged the tail flame behind him as he swooped down from the sky. When he was close to the ground, he quickly flew up in an arc, opened his arms and leisurely hovered in the air. The gorgeous tail flame quietly bloomed under his feet, elegant and calm. After playing for a while, he stopped in the air, rubbed his face with both hands and let out a long sigh. He shook his head and smiled reservedly as if he was lamenting that he also had this day. Guyuan sword art, sword control. Withdraw. Xianxia shouted in the air and clapped his hands together. The 3,000 flying swords drew 3,000 magnificent lines of fire in all directions, and then swarmed towards him in the air. Xianxia clasped his hands together and stood still. Swoosh swoosh. The flying swords shot into his body one by one and then disappeared. When the last sword also disappeared, this beautiful performance finally ended. His figure flashed and he once again landed on the golden altar. After venting for a while, he could be considered to have calmed down. Now he was certain that his cultivation had indeed reached the early stage of tribulation passing. But how did this happen? Although he wasn't completely sure about one thing, he was sure that it had something to do with his understanding of the golden incantation. After thinking for a while, he remembered the various things in the past. He remembered that when he first practiced the fire incantation, although his cultivation had increased, there wasn't much change. If there was any change, it would be when he practiced the water incantation. Once he mastered the water incantation, he immediately broke through from the core formation stage to the nascent soul stage. And then his nascent soul spat out a red and black bead. At that time he didn't pay much attention to it, and thought that it was the result of his rapid cultivation progress. Now that he thought about it, his cultivation speed was indeed too fast. This time he just happened to practice the golden incantation, and his cultivation immediately broke through from the middle stage of nascent soul stage to the early stage of tribulation passing. Could these two breakthroughs be related? Once he mastered the water incantation, he broke through from the core formation stage to the nascent soul stage. Once he mastered the gold incantation, he broke through from the nascent soul stage to the tribulation passing. Then, if he comprehended the wood incantation or the earth incantation the next time, would he? Xianxia's body trembled and his eyes flickered. He didn't dare to think any further. According to his speculation, if he comprehended the wood incantation or the earth incantation again, wouldn't he directly break through from the tribulation passing to the soul formation stage? If he comprehended all 5 incantations and his speculation was correct, he would enter another stage from the soul formation stage. Xianxia subconsciously looked back at the golden horn hanging on the golden chain. He thought to himself perhaps at that time he would be qualified to blow it again. Then he shook his head and smiled bitterly. He still didn't know what was going on with these 5 incantations, and he didn't know when he would have the opportunity to comprehend the next incantation. He couldn't force it, and he was indeed thinking too far ahead. He didn't know that he had already stayed inside for 3 days, but the entire cultivation world outside had already been turned upside down because of him. Xianxia had single-handedly slaughtered more than 2,000 cultivators from various countries. This was simply too shocking. All the soul formation stage cultivators from various countries were furious. They immediately ordered their disciples to kill Xianxia, regardless of whether he was dead or alive. This time, Xianxia had ruthlessly slapped the faces of those soul formation stage cultivators who sent their subordinates to steal the treasures. This slap was incomparably resounding and it shocked the entire cultivation world. But without a doubt it also brought him a lot of trouble. The promise that the soul formation stage cultivators wouldn't interfere was broken. The first to break this promise was the lord of the Jinshan country, the soul formation mid-stage cultivator Pu Taidong. The death of 5 disciples at the end of the tribulation passing stage made him furious. After receiving the news, he immediately rushed to the fog forest. However, with his cultivation he didn't dare to trespass into the fog forest. This surprised his disciples. Third brother Exen, who was present, understood that the fog forest was extremely vicious. His master was proficient in medicine and had personally come here before. After testing the poison, he still didn't dare to enter. As for him telling Xianxia that his master had entered before, it was just to flatter his master. For countless years, no one had ever heard of anyone who entered the fog forest being able to die a good death. It was precisely because it was never accessible that it became a forgotten corner of the world. Pu Taidong personally came to inspect the forest a few times, but he still couldn't find Yu Qianzhou. But this wasn't important. What was important was that he used his actions to tell the entire cultivation world that he had personally made a move. He would no longer abide by that stupid rule. As for his actions, the other soul formation stage cultivators didn't say anything. 5 disciples at the end of the tribulation passing stage had died. No one would let Yu Qianzhou off easily. What's more, since Yu Qianzhou was so powerful, they found a reason to personally make a move. In addition to this matter, there was another news that caused an uproar in the cultivation world. It was that the world's second expert Wen Lanfeng had come out of seclusion. The one who spread this news was naturally Hua Zongming, who was the first to know. Subsequently, under everyone's careful attention, everyone learned from some channels that Wen Lanfeng immediately went to the demon domain after coming out of seclusion. This news immediately aroused everyone's interest. It even overshadowed the limelight of Yu Qianzhou's massacre of 2,000 cultivators. As for why he went to the demon domain, although no one dared to go there to inquire about the news, everyone was undoubtedly clear about it. What else could the world's second expert do other than challenge the world's first expert Bai Chongqun to a duel? Drinking tea and chatting was impossible. Almost all the soul formation stage experts were anxiously and uneasily waiting for the news. There were many reasons. Bai Chongqun's skills shocked the world in the battle in the East Sea. That level of cultivation made everyone feel that they could never surpass it in their lifetime. When Lanfeng could confidently go to the demon domain to find Bai Chongqun, indicating that his cultivation had reached an incredible level after 100 years of seclusion. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to find Bai Chongqun. Bai Chongqun alone was enough to give everyone a headache. Now that there was a similar Wen Lanfeng, everyone felt very bad. But everyone still hoped that Wen Lanfeng would be able to defeat Bai Chongqun this time. Because those who had dealt with Wen Lanfeng knew that he was much easier to talk to than Bai Chongqun. That fellow Bai Chongqun was simply a god of death, and he would start a massacre at the slightest disagreement, causing everyone to be anxious and tremble with fear. If Wen Lanfeng was defeated again, there was no doubt that Bai Chongqun would still be an insurmountable existence. In fact, everyone hoped that both of them would be seriously injured. It would be best if both of them were seriously injured. Then everyone would join forces to get rid of the two in one fell swoop, completely removing the mountain that was pressing on them. Everyone would benefit together. A few days passed. Everyone waited anxiously, but there was no news. They did not know what the situation in the demon domain was like, but no one dared to go there to inquire about the news. Speaking of Wen Lanfeng, he was standing by the lake of Shuntian Island with Nongzhu. The two of them looked at the sparkling lake in the distance and enjoyed it side by side. Nongzhu tilted her head slightly and said, "You are going back." "My injuries have healed. Why do I still stay here? Of course I have to go back." Wen Lanfeng sighed and said, "The world's #1 expert is the world's #1 expert. My cultivation has reached this level, but I still lost to him. I know that I can never surpass him in this life. This is unfathomable. I just don't understand how he can stay in the human world with such a cultivation. It stands to reason that he should have ascended to the immortal world long ago." Nongzhu looked back at him and asked solemnly, "Then what level do you think his cultivation has reached? You're close friends with him. Don't you know better than me?" Wen Lanfeng asked. Not far away, the laughter of 2 women could be heard. Nongzhu looked back and saw Ziyi and Frong talking and laughing. They were probably talking about something about Yu Qianzhou. This was the topic of conversation between the 2 women every day. After looking, she said slowly, "I don't know, so I asked you." Wen Lanfeng shook his head with a wry smile and said, "To tell you the truth, with my current cultivation, I will be able to integrate the 7 spirits hero into my life soul in less than 100 years and then ascend to the immortal world. Because of this, I have the confidence to fight Bai Chongqun. However, even if my cultivation has reached this level, Bai Chongqun can kill me with just a few moves. Can you imagine how high his cultivation is now? It's incredible." "You are about to integrate the 7 spirits hero?" Nongzhu was shocked. "What do you think?" Wen Lanfeng smiled bitterly. Nongzhu knew that Bai Chongqun's cultivation was high, but compared with Wen Lanfeng, she knew how scary it was. She swallowed hard and said, "Old Bai. Does he want to be lazy in the human world for the rest of his life? He has become a land immortal. Isn't he just trying to scare me? They looked at each other and shook their heads speechlessly. When Lan Feng patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, I still have to thank you this time. You saved my life again, so I owe you 2 lives. How can I repay you? This time you broke into the demon ghost region. Old Bai has made up his mind to kill you. I didn't save you. You should thank Old Bai's precious disciple. You should have heard it. Nongzhu shrugged. What kind of person is this Yu Qianchou? How could he be accepted as an official disciple by Bai Chongqun? When Lan Feng asked curiously. What kind of person? Hehe. You won't believe it. It's not wrong to call him a despicable person. Plus. Anyway, he is very bold. You can ask around when you have time. He is completely different from his master. The master is arrogant, but the disciple is wicked. Nongzhu said, do you know what Bai Chongqun said? He said that Yu Qianchou's future achievements will not be lower than his. When Lan Feng was shocked, Bai Chongqun has a unique vision. Since he can make such an evaluation, it must be true. I really want to meet him. Nongzhu turned around and faced him. She frowned and said, Brother Wen, I hope you can take care of this boy. If something happens to him, many people in the cultivation world will die. I have no doubt that Old Bai can massacre the whole world of cultivation. You should know Old Bai's character. He never shows mercy when he needs to. When Lan Feng nodded slightly. At this moment, there was a sudden fluctuation in front of the big house in the center of the island. Nongzhu turned her head and said, It's the message formation of old Nanming. I wonder what news came from Xianxia Island. Let's go and have a look. Chapter 526. When Lan Feng smiled faintly and watched as ancestor Nanming flashed to the big house. During this period of recuperation, ancestor Nanming and Nongzhu had quarreled countless times because of this communication formation. Although they quarreled, Nongzhu could still do whatever she wanted to do. As soon as he teleported over, he saw Nongzhu jump into the communication formation. From afar, ancestor Nanming shouted angrily, Old Nongzhu, how dare you! Bai Chongqun and ancestor Nanming arrived at the same time. The former frowned while the latter rushed into the transmission formation and stared at Nongzhu. Nongzhu snorted coldly, Bai kindness is really unrewarded. I wanted to do it for you when you weren't here, but I had to look at your face. She slowly walked out with her hands behind her back. I've never seen anyone as thick-skinned as you. Ancestor Nanming mocked. He did not say much and decided to contact Xianxia Island first. On the other side, Ze and Hibiscus glanced over at them. After that, they went back to talking about themselves. They were already used to this kind of scene. There was nothing to worry about. After a while, ancestor Nanming walked out of the communication formation and looked at Bai Chongqun with a hesitant look. Nongzhu, who tilted her head, walked back as if nothing had happened. She coughed and said, What's the trouble? Why don't you tell us? Is it related to me? Bai Chongqun looked at him and more or less guessed something. Ancestor Nanming nodded and said, Bai Chongqun, your disciple Yu Qianchou might be in trouble. When Lan Feng and Nongzhu looked at each other and stared at ancestor Nanming at the same time. Bai Chongqun opened his eyes slightly and said, Speak your mind. Grandmaster Nanming was silent for a while, then he slowly repeated the news that came from Xianxia Island. He told him about how the various countries hunted Yu Qianchou for his treasured blade, how Yu Qianchou slaughtered nearly 2,000 cultivators from the various countries outside the Misty Forest, and how he hid in the Misty Forest in the end. In fact, Xianxia Island had also spread the news that when Lan Feng had come to the demon domain to challenge Bai Chongqun to a duel. However, ancestor Nanming had witnessed the whole thing and knew that everything was fine now. Naturally, there was no need to mention this unpleasant matter. After old ancestor Nanming finished speaking, the entire place was silent. Bai Chongqun's cold gaze flickered continuously. After Nongzhu came back to her senses, she cried out involuntarily, Nanming, did you hear it wrong? You're saying that Yu Qianchou single-handedly massacred nearly 2,000 cultivators from various countries? Also, Yu Qianchou could actually come and go as he pleased in the Misty Forest? How is this possible? It shouldn't be wrong. My disciple said that this matter has already spread like wildfire in the cultivation world. At that time there were thousands of people who witnessed it. Grandmaster Nanming looked at Bai Chongqun and said, Among these 2,000 cultivators, the lowest cultivation level is at the nascent soul realm. Pu Taidong even had 5 disciples at the end of the tribulation passing stage, and they died under Yu Qianzhou's flying sword. Is this kid crazy? Nongzhu asked in a daze. When Lanfeng was also shocked. In his life he had never killed so many people at once. He glanced at Bai Chongqun. Like master like disciple. They're both cruel and merciless. Grandmaster Nanming said in a low voice. Pu Taidong has personally come out because of the death of his 5 disciples at the end of the tribulation passing stage. The soul-forming realm cultivators of various countries are also restless. Pu Taidong. What a great ability. Bai Chongqun said softly. His voice was not loud, but the coldness in his words sent a chill down the 3's spines. The 3 of them looked at each other. If Pu Taidong knew that he had provoked Bai Chongqun's disciple, how would he feel? As expected, Bai Chongqun said with a cold gaze, more than 5,000 cultivators are after my disciple. Pu Taidong's disciple is a human, but is my disciple not a human? It seems that the Lord of Jinshan Kingdom has to be changed. He looked back at Grandmaster Nanming and said, Nanming, I'll leave the matters here to you for the time being. I'll go to other countries and see how many heads Pu Taidong has grown. The few of them were shocked when they heard this. Was he going to start a massacre? Grandmaster Nanming stammered. Then, Nongzhu frowned and immediately sent a voice transmission to Wen Lanfeng. Brother Wen, once this crazy old man goes out, the cultivation world will definitely collapse. Just do as we agreed, please. Bai Tongqun. Wen Lanfeng took a step forward and said with a smile, Thank you for showing mercy. You should focus on your own business with Nanming first. You don't need to do it yourself. It's making a mountain out of a molehill if you do it. Although I, Wen Lanfeng, am no match for you, I'm confident that I still have some influence in the cultivation world. I'm about to say goodbye to you. I'll go back and take care of your disciple. Bai Chongqun was startled. Although Wen Lanfeng was no match for him with his cultivation, he would probably have few opponents in the cultivation world. It shouldn't be difficult for him to go out and help them. That's right. Why didn't I think of that? Nongzhu appeared to be suddenly enlightened. She walked over and patted Wen Lanfeng's shoulder saying, Old Wen, you're right. Sending old Bai out personally is making a mountain out of a molehill. It's best if you go out and warn those soul formation cultivators, haha. Right. Grandmaster Nanming struck while the iron was hot, saying, Bai Chongqun, let's leave this matter to Wen Lanfeng. The arrays in Twilight Valley are too complicated. I've almost gotten dizzy several times. I'll have to trouble you to stay and lead the way for me. These words were a little fake. Given Grandmaster Nanming's artificing skills, he had probably memorized the arrays by heart after being led around so many times. It should be known that the more skilled a person was at artificing, the higher their attainments in arrays. Otherwise, he would not have become the world's #1 artificer. Nongzhu immediately shot him a disdainful look. Wasn't this more of a hindrance than a help? The Grandmaster Nanming also realized that he had gone too far and subconsciously shrank back. Bai Chongqun was no fool. He glanced at them and understood what they were thinking. He slowly said to Wen Lanfeng, Then I'll have to trouble you. These words immediately made the 3 sigh in relief. Wen Lanfeng's melancholy eyes revealed a hint of a smile and he cupped his hands saying, Goodbye. With that he disappeared and reappeared in the air, a shadow rapidly tearing through the air. Countless soul formation cultivators had been waiting for him on the road from the demon realm to the Baiwan kingdom. There was no way around it. No one dared to trespass the demon realm, so they could only wait outside. Moreover, this was a place Wen Lanfeng had to pass on his way back to the Baiwan kingdom. Of course, the premise was that Wen Lanfeng could return alive. Wen Lanfeng flew across the sky, not knowing that so many people were waiting for him below. With his extremely high cultivation, even a master at the final stage of the crossing calamity stage would not be able to see him with the naked eye. His flying speed was so fast that it was almost silent. With a faint whooshing sound, the people squatting below immediately pricked up their ears. The people below almost couldn't see Wen Lanfeng's figure when they looked up. However, they could tell that the sound was coming from the Baiwan kingdom. Judging from the shocking speed of the sound, they were basically sure that it was Wen Lanfeng. In particular, there were several practitioners at the early stage of the soul formation realm on the way. They saw the almost indistinct shadow and recognized that it was Wen Lanfeng from the figure. Compared with the others, they were even more shocked. They didn't expect that Wen Lanfeng's cultivation had reached such a high level after 100 years of seclusion. No wonder he dared to challenge Bai Changchun. To everyone's surprise, Wen Lanfeng came back safe and sound. Could it be that Bai Changchun had been defeated by him? This news was so important that everyone spread the news as fast as they could. For a moment, the soul formation realm in the cultivation world was boiling again. Bai Changchun was very likely defeated by Wen Lanfeng. On the top of a snowy mountain in the Dirong Empire, Bing Qingzi, who was at the final stage of the soul formation realm, suddenly opened his eyes and stood up. He looked in the direction of the Baiwan kingdom in a daze, his white robe fluttering in the wind. In the cloud palace of the heavenly peak in the East Nation, Hu Changshou, who was at the final stage of the soul formation realm, flashed out of the palace and looked in the direction of the Baiwan kingdom through the sea of clouds. In the Tuan kingdom, the headquarters of the World Chamber of Commerce Cornucopia, God of Wealth Peak, Yin Baikong was also looking in the direction of the Baiwan kingdom. He stroked the trunk of a pine tree and said in a muffled voice, "Wen Lanfeng defeated Bai Changchun? Unbelievable. Xikong, you've seen Bai Changchun's skills in the East Sea. Do you think this news is reliable?" Behind him stood a skinny man with white hair. He was his eldest disciple, the early stage of the soul formation realm, Xikongju. The gloomy Xikongju replied, "It's hard to say. I don't believe that there's always the number one in the world. Besides, Wen Lanfeng has really returned. There's no doubt about it." "You mean Wen Lanfeng might really defeat Bai Changchun?" Yin Baikong turned around and asked. "Not necessarily." Xikongju frowned and said, "There's something that I can't figure out. It's said that Wen Lanfeng went to the demon domain more than 10 days ago. Is his battle with Bai Changchun going to last more than 10 days? Yes. Yin Baikong looked in the direction of the Baiwan kingdom again and sighed. "We'll understand everything after we go to the demon domain. However, the final news is not confirmed yet. If we suddenly go there, I'm afraid we'll get ourselves into trouble. Since Wen Lanfeng can return from the demon domain alive, it's worth it for us to make a great effort to befriend him no matter if he wins or loses. Xikong, prepare a gift for me. I'm going to Baiwan Kingdom to congratulate Wen Lanfeng for coming out of seclusion. By the way, I want a big gift." "Understood. I'll do it now." Xikongju bowed and left. The top 10 experts of the cultivation world were all late-stage soul formation experts. Unfortunately, 2 of them were killed by Bai Changchun in the Battle of the East Sea. In other words, there were only 8 late-stage soul formation experts left in the entire cultivation world. Among the 8, apart from Bai Changchun, Wen Lanfeng, Yin Baikong, Bing Qingzi, and Hu Changshou, the remaining 3 were also staring in the direction of the Baiwan kingdom. They all felt that it was time to make a trip there. There were also lords of the mid-stage soul formation experts who came to the Baiwan kingdom one after another. All of them brought gifts of great value. It should be known that if Wen Lanfeng really defeated Bai Changchun, he would be the true number 1 expert in the world. Even if he didn't defeat Bai Changchun, Wen Lanfeng's cultivation was worth befriending. Moreover, everyone wanted to inquire about the news. Chapter 527. The people who paid the most attention to Wen Lanfeng were naturally the people of the Wen family. Wen Rui had already sent people to wait outside the Fei Ghost domain while he stayed in the Wen family to make arrangements. What arrangements? Naturally, it was to prepare for the Wen family's retreat after Wen Lanfeng was killed by Bai Changchun. It was related to the rise and fall of a big family, so early preparations had to be made. Baiwan country's holy land, the Holy Temple. Wen Rui stood quietly in the center of the hall, spending more than 10 days in anxiety and uneasiness. The disciples sent to wait outside the Fei Ghost domain sent news that the old ancestor had safely returned from the Fei Ghost domain and was heading to Baiwan country. Ah! Wen Rui raised his head and roared, shaking the furnishings in the hall and causing them to fall to the ground. The anxiety and uneasiness that had accumulated over the past few days poured out. This news was not told to anyone because the old ancestor did not like to be ostentatious. A figure flashed and appeared in the sky above the Holy Land alone, waiting for the old ancestor's return with an excited face. Wen Rui was even more excited when a figure rapidly approached from the distance. The old ancestor's cultivation had indeed improved greatly. Then, his vision blurred and a tall figure in a gray and white robe appeared in front of him. The gray and white robe fluttered in the wind. Wen Lanfeng smiled faintly and said, "Wen Rui, you've worked hard all these years." This sentence made Wen Rui's nose turn sour. He bowed deeply and said, "Welcome, old ancestor. Let's go back and talk." Wen Lanfeng had disappeared, but his voice still floated here. Wen Rui turned and returned. The holy temple of Baiwan country was hidden in the mountains and rivers. It was a palace made of white jade, white and warm, elegant and extraordinary. Wen Lanfeng walked in slowly. At this time, the holy temple was covered with things that had been tidied up. It was still clean and tidy. Because the jade was transparent and the dome was made of thin jade, the entire temple was filled with a hazy white light. That holy aura made everyone's heart feel holy and clear. Wen Lanfeng quietly walked to the central seat slightly higher than the entire hall and sat down. Under the holy white light, he looked at Wen Rui and smiled. "Were you waiting for me outside?" Although their cultivation was only 2 levels apart, Wen Rui was considered Wen Lanfeng's great-grandson. They were family. Wen Lanfeng had always been amiable, so Wen Rui was not nervous. He said frankly, "I heard that the old ancestor has returned from the Fey Ghost domain. Of course I have to welcome you. Let me ask you about someone." "I don't know if you know him," Wen Lanfeng said. Wen Lanfeng said, "Who?" Wen Rui had originally wanted to ask the old ancestor about the battle situation with Bai Changchun, but since the old ancestor had asked, he naturally had to reply first. "Yu Qianchou." Wen Lanfeng asked, "Have you heard of this person?" "Yu Qianchou?" Wen Rui was stunned. Although he didn't understand why the great ancestor would mention Yu Qianchou, he still told him everything he knew. "Not only do we know each other, but we even dated for a period of time. The cause of the matter was Mr. Nongzhu. This Yu Qianchou pretended to be Mr. Nongzhu and got into a fight with the Wen family." He told how the Wen clan got acquainted with Yu Qianchou, and how Yu Qianchou fought with the cultivators of the various nations during the Deyang Kingdom's Prince Consort Selection martial arts competition, and how Yu Qianchou's subordinates profaned the princess of Deyang Kingdom. In order to protect his subordinates, he killed Hu Zongming's disciple, and then escaped from Deyang City. These were all the information that Wen Bai sent back. Impersonating Nongzhu? Wen Lanfeng was stunned for a moment, but then he felt relieved. The two of them knew each other, but after hearing Wen Rui's words, Yu Qianchou was indeed as wicked as Nongzhu said. Could it be that he had to protect such a guy? He smiled bitterly and shook his head. "I heard that Yu Qianchou has caused some trouble recently?" "Yes." Wen Rui nodded and told him about Yu Qianchou's massacre in the fog forest. After he finished, he sighed. "This guy has an endless stream of strange skills. I didn't expect him to be able to come and go freely in the fog forest. I heard from Nongzhu that he has a powerful background, but I don't know the specifics." His background is indeed powerful. Nongzhu's words are correct. Wen Lanfeng sighed. "What is his background? Elder ancestor, can you tell me?" Wen Rui asked curiously. "Don't tell anyone else." Wen Lanfeng sighed. "Yu Qianchou is Bai Changchun's disciple." "What?" Wen Rui was surprised. "I had guessed it before, but I didn't expect him to be Bai Changchun's disciple." After thinking about it, he asked nervously, "Did the ancestor go to the demon domain to find Bai Changchun?" Wen Lanfeng understood something from his twinkling eyes. He shook his head and sighed. I lost again to Bai Changchun, and it was even worse than 100 years ago. My life was hanging by a thread and Nongzhu saved me again. Bai Changchun is an existence that I can never surpass." His tone was full of bitterness. Wen Rui was silent. Nongzhu had already told him that the ancestor was no match for Bai Changchun. He was someone who knew, so he was not surprised. At least the ancestor came back alive, which was a blessing in disguise. After a pause, he said, "Ancestor, there are many people in the cultivation world who are concerned about this matter. A bunch of arrogant guys. Everyone knows what they are planning. If I had known, I would have let Bai Changchun do it himself." Wen Lanfeng sneered. "But it's fine. Saves me a lot of trouble. I just need to wait for the guest." Wen Rui nodded and then added softly, "Ancestor, not long after you left, Senior Lu of Spirit Fong Valley came to find you. Upon hearing this, Wen Lanfeng jumped to his feet and muttered to himself with an excited expression, "She came to see me personally? He came to find me personally." After a few words of excitement, his expression became gloomy again. He shook his head and said, "I'm afraid that she came to find me for no other reason. She must have heard the news and came to stop me from going to the demon domain to find Bai Chongqun. I haven't fulfilled my promise to defeat Bai Chongqun. How can I face you? I'm afraid I won't have the chance in this life. Why should I see you again?" When Rui lowered his head helplessly, "Sister, just wake up." However, this was the ancestor's private matter. It was not his place to interrupt. Yu Qianzhou, who was in the mist forest, knew nothing about what was happening outside. After knowing that he had become an expert in the early stage of tribulation passing, he looked around happily. He stood on the golden altar and giggled unscrupulously. After all, he was the only one here. Before leaving, Yu Qianzhou suddenly raised his arms and shouted, "Thank you, dense fog forest, thank you, 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 thank you." What do you mean? Is someone from the immortal world coming again? Yu Qianzhou put down his hands and looked around in shock at the colorful fog on the mountain peak. He guessed that another immortal was going to suffer. He took a few steps back and stood at the edge of the altar, leaving the center of the altar for the immortal world to descend to the mortal world. Yu Qianzhou crossed his arms and looked on coldly. He snorted and said, "Life is short. Like the morning dew, there are not many people who can see the immortal world die." He looked very proud, thinking about what treasure the next immortal world would have. Outside the mist forest, the cultivators from the various countries had already dispersed. However, there were still some people hiding in the surrounding clouds. They were the people from the various countries who stayed behind to continue observing. They wanted to prevent Yu Qianzhou from running away. Even if they didn't catch him, they would at least follow him when they discovered him. However, these people suddenly realized that in the sky above the central area of the mist forest, there were dark clouds rolling, lightning flashing, and thunder rumbling. The dark clouds kept rolling, accumulating into a thick layer of clouds. Lightning dragons flickered in and out of the clouds, spitting out ferocious lightning bolts. Suddenly, an early-stage tribulation passing cultivator shouted, "It's the tribulation clouds." Someone beside him frowned and said, "Something is going through the tribulation clouds in the mist forest. I don't know if it's a human, a demon, or a ghost." The people hiding in the clouds came out one after another. One should know that the power contained in the tribulation clouds was huge. It was even more powerful than the people who were going through the tribulation clouds below. Once the surrounding clouds and mist were implicated, the people hiding inside wouldn't have a good time. Actually, there was something that Yu Qianzhou, who was hiding inside, and the cultivators hiding outside did not know. Previously, when the Immortal Ascension passage opened, although the sky was also covered by dark clouds, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, the people outside the mist forest did not see or hear anything. On the contrary, the appearance of the tribulation clouds this time allowed everyone to see it. Yu Qianzhou, who was standing on the golden altar with his arms crossed, gradually felt that something was wrong. The wind and clouds were turbulent, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. However, it did not condense into a black hole like last time. Instead, it seemed like a conspiracy was brewing in the sky. The strong wind swept through the basin. Yu Qianzhou was like a small boat in the raging waves. He wanted to leave, but in order to see what was happening behind him, he was forced to stay by the side and hugged a golden pillar to resist the strong wind. "Damn it! I'll endure it for the sake of watching a good show. I hope you won't disappoint me." Yu Qianzhou hugged the pillar and shouted towards the sky. He thought that the commotion this time was even bigger than the previous time when the immortals descended to the mortal world. He reckoned that there would be a good show to watch and perhaps the benefits would be greater. In the end, the heavens immediately gave him an answer. Boom! A loud sound shook the sky and the basin was filled with echoes. A ferocious and meandering thick thunderbolt instantly smashed down with a bang, illuminating the entire basin clearly. The sound and the aura were shocking. Yu Qianzhou felt that it was blinding and he squinted his eyes. However, before he could react, he felt as if he was struck by lightning and his whole body went numb. He who was hugging the golden pillar was sent flying and rolled to the center of the golden altar. His whole body was charred and his clothes were ragged. The charred smoke from his body was blown away by the wind. He laid there and his eyes rolled back and he instantly fainted. The so-called tribulation clouds were the 9 stages of tribulation clouds in the sky. Each stage was stronger than the previous one. If one could withstand it, he would succeed. If not, there was no need to explain the consequences. In fact, the early stage of tribulation clouds was not very difficult for most cultivators to withstand. However, Xianxia did not even think about tribulation clouds and was still waiting to watch the show. In the end, he was unprepared for the lightning's wrath, and it would be strange if he was not unlucky. This was retribution. The lightning flashed more frequently in the dark clouds, and the next wave of more powerful lightning strikes was coming. However, Xianxia really fainted. At this moment, a golden light suddenly appeared from his abdomen, and it was even more dazzling than the entire golden altar. It slowly wrapped around Xianxia. Chapter 528. The dark clouds in the sky darkened and the wind surged. The lightning dragon stuck out its tongue and peeped at the golden light below. The situation seemed to be a confrontation. Suddenly there was a thunderclap and a lightning bolt as thick as a bucket drilled out of the dark clouds and went straight for the golden light in the center of the altar. The golden light that was wrapped around Xianxia also shone with thousands of golden rays in an instant, enveloping the entire platform of the altar. A green and white light and a golden light instantly collided with each other. Boom! The two forces collided, creating a loud sound in the air, and a powerful shock wave spread to the entire basin. The green and white lightning bolt was obviously weaker, and it was instantly destroyed by the brilliant golden light. Even the cultivators outside the fog forest heard the loud sound, and they looked at each other in shock, not knowing what was going on. At first, the first lightning bolt looked quite normal, like someone in the early stage of the tribulation passing. How did the second lightning bolt become so powerful in an instant? It was like a cultivator in the middle stage of the tribulation passing. Someone cried out in surprise. In the sky above the center of the fog forest, the dark clouds gradually turned as black as ink, surging and surging. It was extremely terrifying, and countless lightning dragons were shuttling in the dark clouds. The scene was even worse than the tribulation passing at the end of the tribulation passing. Just as the thunder in the sky was brewing its power, the golden light in the basin seemed to be angry. The golden light shot up from the basin into the sky like countless giant golden thorns, shining and stirring the dark clouds. In the ink-like dark clouds, the lightning bolts became more intense, and they crazily revolved around the golden thorns. The monstrous wind and waves rushed in all directions, forcing people thousands of meters away to quickly retreat. Everyone looked at the scene in the distance, bewildered. In the dark clouds, a golden light pierced through the sky and rushed into the universe. The golden light shone in the universe, and then it immediately retracted as if it was summoning something. In the vast universe, because of the appearance of this golden light, the nearby 12 stars instantly shone with silver splendor, and they quickly shot toward the coordinates exposed by the golden light. 12 rays of silver light broke through the atmosphere and shot toward the dark clouds that were entangled with the golden light. Every time the silver splendor rushed into the dark clouds, there would be an earth-shattering explosion in the sky. 12 consecutive earth-shattering explosions were deafening to the ears of those hiding 10,000 meters away. The dark clouds that filled the sky were instantly dispersed by the 12 silver splendors. The sporadic lightning also disappeared without a trace with 2 crackling sounds. The moment the dark clouds dispersed, the people in the distance could see the sky clearly. Tens of thousands of golden rays converged into a single line and returned to the fog forest. The 12 silver rays that came from the sky followed the direction where the golden rays had returned. On the altar in the basin, the golden light retracted back into Xianxia's abdomen. The concentrated silver light descended from the sky and covered his body. The silver light flashed for a while. After a while, the silver light shrunk back into the sky and split into 12 silver pillars again. At this point, everything returned to its original state. Oh my God. On the golden altar, Xianxia woke up with a groan. He got up and looked around, but he didn't find anything unusual. Was it a dream? Wasn't it a little too real? Xianxia turned around twice suspiciously. Suddenly he realized that something was wrong with his body. He looked at himself and was instantly shocked. His entire body seemed to be swollen and was wrapped in a charred mass. Both his hands were like bare paws. He quickly peeled himself off, and the charred shell on his body started to crack and fall off piece by piece. Damn it! So I was really struck by lightning just now. Xianxia kept cursing. After peeling off the charred shell on his body, he immediately circulated the water art, and a water dragon wrapped around him to wash him. After cleaning up, he quickly took a set of clothes from Utopia and put them on. He searched the ground and realized that his storage bag had become a tattered cloth bag. Fortunately, it was just a decoration and didn't contain anything. On the other hand, the bracelet on his wrist was still intact. The quality of the items of the deities was indeed better. He finally understood that he was undergoing tribulation transcendence just now. As his cultivation had already broken through to the early stage of tribulation transcendence, he was still waiting for the lightning to strike him. It was good that he didn't die, so he didn't dare to complain. However, what made him feel strange was that tribulation transcendence should have 9 lightning tribulations. Could it be that he had fainted on the ground and endured the other 8 lightning strikes? Even the people watching from afar couldn't figure it out, let alone those who were asleep. It clearly looked like a tribulation transcendence, but the state of the lightning strikes was somewhat abnormal. The strangest thing was that after 2 lightning strikes, the tribulation clouds were dispersed by the golden light on the ground and the silver light that descended from the sky. Such a phenomenon was unheard of and unseen. Such a phenomenon naturally had to be reported, so the cultivators all reported what had happened. Xianxia searched the basin carefully again. When he realized that there was nothing that interested him, he flew out of the basin without another word. After finding the direction he had come from, he released the blue fire flying sword to scout ahead and quietly returned to the place where he had been entangled with the various sections. After checking, he realized that there was no one outside. He immediately felt that it was strange. Could there be an ambush outside? Thinking about it, he felt that it was possible. He retreated into the depths of the fog and disappeared. Once he returned to Utopia, he immediately found Guan Yu and asked him to come up with another battle plan. Guan Yu said in shock, "Who are you targeting this time? Damn it! Over 5,000 people are chasing after me. This is intolerable. Especially those bastards from the Jinshan kingdom." Xianxia said fiercely, "The target is very clear. The coordinates of the Jinshan kingdom's spirit stone mine are all in place. I'll go scout tonight. Get ready, just like what happened to the Dian kingdom last time." Hearing that Xianxia was being chased by over 5,000 people, Guan Yu's face sank. He nodded and said, "Don't worry, the team can assemble at any time to fight. However, don't you have to consider something? We just massacred the Dian kingdom's spirit stone mine. Will the Jinshan kingdom be prepared?" Xianxia immediately replied, "That's why I'm going to scout. If it really causes a large number of casualties, I naturally won't act rashly. It's not worth it. However, I think their attention is not on the spirit stone mine now. I'm afraid it's a good opportunity for us to strike." Understood. Guan Yu nodded decisively. He didn't know that Xianxia had attracted a lot of attention by killing more than 2,000 people outside. Since Xianxia said it was okay, what else could he say? Dian City, Rong Kingdom's embassy. State preceptor man who led 3 junior brothers to accompany Yan Zhuixing, while 3rd brother and 4th brother stayed on Everlasting Island. At this time, Yan Zhuixing was asking a Rong Kingdom cultivator about Xianxia in detail. Because they didn't know that Xianxia had massacred 2,000 cultivators on the way, they were shocked when they learned about it. They didn't expect Xianxia to be so powerful. Yan Zhuixing's eyes flashed with brilliance and he kept smiling. After learning that when Lanfeng had come out of seclusion and had returned to Baiwan Kingdom from Monster Domain, Man who waved his hand to dismiss the cultivator and asked, "Young Palace Master, what's your next step? From what you said, it seems that when Lanfeng might have defeated the world's #1 expert. It's really admirable." Yan Zhuixing turned back and said, "I want to see the world's #2 expert. I wonder if State Preceptor has a way to take me there?" This man who pondered for a while and shook his head. It's difficult to break into Baiwan Kingdom's sacred land. I'm afraid it won't be easy to meet Wen Lanfeng. There's always a way. Yan Zhuixing pursed his lips and smiled faintly. I have a hunch that since Baiwan Kingdom is so lively, we might meet Xianxia there. Hearing that they could meet Yu Qianzhou, their faces darkened. He was the enemy who killed their second brother. Man who said in a deep voice, "Since young palace master wants to go, we'll accompany you. When Lan Feng coming out of seclusion is a big deal. Maybe we can meet master." "That's great. I'm about to thank him for taking care of me." Yan Zhuixing sighed. After a short discussion, they decided on the itinerary to Baiwan Kingdom. The unusual phenomenon in the fog forest set off an uproar in the cultivation world. Such a divine event had never been heard of before. It was really unbelievable. However, what made people depressed was that this matter just had to happen in the misty forest, making people unable to investigate even if they wanted to. Then the next day, another shocking event happened in the cultivation world. 13 spirit stone mines in the Jinshan Kingdom were all massacred overnight. Everything that could be looted was robbed and everyone who could be killed was killed. The situation was the same as in the Dian Kingdom. All the spirit stone mines were blown up. The most arrogant thing was that the murderer did not hide anything at all. The 13 hero flags were all in the 13 spirit stone mines. It was obvious that the murderer did not care about the Jinshan Kingdom's lord, Pu Taidong. In the Jinshan Kingdom's throne room, Pu Taidong was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He looked up to the sky and roared. He couldn't figure it out and he couldn't understand it. He didn't know what kind of bad luck he had run into. First, 5 disciples in the late tribulation passing stage had been killed, and now all the spirit stone mines had suffered such a fate. The losses were too heavy and his vitality was greatly damaged. This wasn't something that could be recovered in a year or two. Overnight, the entire cultivation world suddenly realized that during this period of time, either nothing happened or something big happened, attracting everyone's attention. Everyone started counting with their fingers. First, Yin Baikong's grandson was kidnapped by a hero in the Dian Kingdom. Yin Baikong did not have any temper and paid more than 300 million spirit stones. Second, Yu Qianzhou was discovered after he snuck in. He claimed to be the #1 expert below the soul formation stage, which attracted the attention of the cultivators of the various countries. In the end, the cultivators of the various countries suffered a loss. Third, Huizongming's 17 spirit stone mines were massacred by a hero overnight, which shocked the entire cultivation world. Fourth, Yu Qianzhou was chased by the cultivators of the various countries. After he escaped to the fog forest, he turned around and slaughtered nearly 2,000 cultivators of the various countries. This shocked the entire cultivation world again. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.